Hello everyone, this is Fantasy Audiobook. Here you find original fan made audio stories.
Myth. I spread divine seeds in Greek mythology. Part 4. I truly envy your pure friendship, Apollo said, a hint of admiration flashing in his eyes. Sorophine turned his head, looked at Apollo with a smile, and said, "You will have it too, at some point in the future." Perhaps, but I want it now. Could you please give me a golden peach? Apollo looked at Sorophine with burning intensity. There is a legend on the earth that in a place where even the gods cannot find, there grows such a peach tree. It has golden roots, golden leaves, and golden branches. Even the sap flowing within it is golden. It takes 1,000 years to sprout stamens, 1,000 years for the petals to wither, 1,000 years to grow small fruits, and 1,000 years to ripen. Whoever obtains this golden peach will gain eternal friendship. And as the master of the peach trees, can you give me such a golden peach? Apollo asked. Hearing this, Sorophine said with a smile, I am sorry, Prince Apollo. Although I am the master of the peach trees, I cannot find this specific tree. It only appears beside pure friendship and only manifests for those in need. I have no way to control it. It is also the only thing I cannot control, Sorophine said earnestly. Because friendship is free, it cannot be imprisoned or influenced by any power. It is also clear, it cannot tolerate the dust of suspicion, nor does it reflect the shadows of hypocrisy. Friendship is enduring, its depth is not measured by days and nights, nor its length by mountains and seas. It is also serene, it doesn't need to be spoken of constantly, yet it allows one to understand the other in silence. Friendship is resilient, it can withstand the passing of ordinary years and the trials of wind and rain. It is also equal, it needs neither to look up at someone's brilliance nor look down at someone's vulnerability. Sorophine explained the unique power of friendship. I understand. Apollo sighed and said softly, I will search for my own friend, until the end of time, until the seas run dry and the rocks crumble, until the eternal end of the world. Friends do not need to be sought out intentionally. Perhaps he or she will appear by your side unexpectedly, you just need a little more patience, Sorophine said seriously. Apollo opened his mouth, nodded restlessly, and signaled his understanding. Meanwhile, Irene, the goddess who brings autumn, overheard the conversation between Sorophine, Hephaestus, and Apollo, her eyes sparkling with light. Her heart was filled with curiosity. What kind of god was Sorophine exactly? Why was he so different? And what exactly was compassion? Why was he the only one in the world to obtain such authority? Carrying these questions, she brought autumn and, mimicking Sorophine, clumsily bestowed the power of prosperity upon the plants, making the fruits larger and sweeter. When everything was finished, her two older sisters, Onomia, the goddess of spring, and goddess Dike, the goddess of summer, said somewhat impatiently, Oh, my dear sister, why were you so slow in performing your priesthood this time? Usually by now, we would already be in our secret garden, admiring the beautiful flowers and tasting the various flavors of honey brewed by the bees. Irene, the goddess of autumn, scratched her head in embarrassment and said, I met Prince Sorophine on the earth. Sorophine. Onomia, the goddess of spring, said with some disdain. Just a lucky, green youth. Beside her, goddess Dike, the goddess of summer, also replied, What's wrong? Did something happen to him? Was he taught a lesson by the sun god Helios? She remembered Helios furiously driving the sun chariot out of Olympus, muttering, Sorophine. Sorophine. No, I saw Prince Sorophine constantly sowing seed, bringing new possibilities to the plants so they could leave descendants. Prince Sorophine also obtained. Before Irene, the goddess of autumn, could finish, goddess Dike interrupted impatiently, Irene, have you been influenced by Aphrodite's power? You just got back, and all you talk about is Sorophine this, Prince Sorophine that. Love is a foolish thing, and a terrifying one. It makes you blind, it makes you stupid, and it makes you beyond saving. Do you remember the former goddess Taro? For the sake of love, she actually abandoned her priesthood just to resurrect her lover. And her lover, under the bewitchment of the underworld king's soul, actually betrayed her and cast her into an eternal slumber. Truly foolish beyond hope. She is still sleeping to this day. Onomia, the goddess of spring, chimed in. So, Irene, you must never be influenced by love. What if you fall into a long sleep? We are the family who stays with you day and night, Goddess Dyke said, her tone softening as she advised. Seeing her two sisters' opposition, Irene, the goddess of autumn, nodded gently, but she had doubts in her heart. Was it really like that? The reputation of Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, was on par with Zeus in Olympus, but the god who wielded that power did not mean love was the same as that goddess. Moreover, Sorophine could bring a glimmer of possibility to creatures that gods like them wouldn't even glance at. Could such a god really be as terrifying as her sisters said? Furthermore, Sorophine carried a charming aura of fate that she couldn't help but be immersed in. To be able to turn the impossible into the possible, such power truly fascinated her. Irene, what are you dazing off for? Come on, let's go taste the honey from the cold fragrance flowers. I heard this honey has a unique flavor when paired with ice cubes, Anamia excitedly invited Irene. Ice cubes, isn't that Prince Sorophine's power? After Apollo left, Hephaestus's expression began to struggle before becoming solemn. Sorophine, if you truly want to become the God King, you must tell me. I will become your most powerful supporter. I will pave the way for you to become the God King. Any god who stands in your way will be my enemy. Hephaestus said seriously to Sorophine. Sorophine shook his head and said, I do not want to become the God King. Besides, I still have many duties of my priesthood to fulfill. I haven't thought about that at all. Ah, right, I should bring a few active volcanoes to the earth. They haven't erupted for tens of thousands of years. Human inner voice. Oh, no. Don't come over here. However, perhaps due to Sorophine's influence, Hephaestus did not let the volcanoes erupt in places where life gathered, but instead formed a stable small crater that emitted light and heat, much like Mount Fuji on the island nation from Sorophine's previous life. But the ocean was in a sorry state. The undersea volcanoes flowed incessantly, bringing nearly endless lava. Sorophine was also fulfilling the duties of various priesthoods. He grumbled, oh dear, what's going on? Why are my priesthoods increasing, and the time I spend fulfilling them is getting longer and longer? If the demon and nymph heard these words, they would surely show looks of envy and jealousy. If you don't want so many priesthoods, then give them to me. I am willing to fulfill those priesthoods in your stead. Meanwhile, in the Temple of Thunder, Zeus had a hint of a smile on his face. Helios, I hope you can handle this gift. Apollo, who was on the earth, also began to take action. After all, this was about obtaining a priesthood for himself. If he didn't work hard, he would truly be unworthy of such a priesthood. While Sorophine was fulfilling his priesthood duties, he suddenly heard some rumors, which made him stop in his tracks. Have you heard? In the distant blazing sun forest, there's a demigod who actually claims to be the child of Lord Helios, the sun god. How ridiculous. Yeah. If he were the child of the sun god, how could he be a mere demigod? Oh, what was that fool's name again? I think it was Phaethon. Sorophine narrowed his eyes. Phaethon. He carefully observed the spread of these rumors and found they were limited to the vicinity of the blazing sun forest. Step outside that area, and the rumors vanished. Has it begun? There was a look of complexity in Sorophine's eyes. This storm caused by the power of the sun would sweep across the entire world, and more than 99% of the life in this world would perish. No, if he didn't intervene, it would become 100%. Speaking of Phaethon, he was a pitiful demigod. He was the child of the sun god Helios and Clymene, the goddess of fame. Even at his worst, he existed as a demigod. However, Clymene, the goddess of fame, did not provide enough nourishment for this child while she was pregnant with him, resulting in Phaethon only being able to become a demigod. As for why Clymene acted this way, it involved Iapetus, god of souls, one of the previous generation of Titans, who was the husband of Clymene, the goddess of fame. When Iapetus, god of souls, was imprisoned in the hell of Tartarus, her heart was filled with incomparable pain. To soothe that pain, she constantly sought out lovers. Even her child with Iapetus, god of souls, Prometheus Forethinker, became her lover. But this still couldn't alleviate the void in her heart, so Clymene, the goddess of fame, got together with Helios, the sun god, and gave birth to Phaethon, the only demigod born of two deities. As the rumors spread through the blazing sun forest, Soraphine's expression was very complex, but he did not choose to warn or change anything. After all, Zeus had been plotting this for millions of years. If it were sabotaged, it wouldn't be as simple as a life and death grudge. Furthermore, Helios's previous grievances with him would not allow him to offer any warnings. Repaying injury with kindness, then how would one repay kindness? Although Soraphine was compassionate, he hadn't reached that level yet. The complexity and pity in his heart were for the lives that would die in this disaster, not for Helios. Lord Hephaestus, if I knew of a disaster but didn't stop it, or if stopping it required me to pay a huge price and I chose to stand by and watch, do you think I'm doing the right thing? Soraphine asked. Hearing Soraphine's question, Hephaestus said subconsciously, not causing trouble is the best sympathy you can show them. After all, when a disaster occurs, if a god doesn't add fuel to the fire, it's already mercy, Hephaestus said, using Soraphine's priesthood. Mercy. Soraphine said with a complex look in his eyes. Then let's go. Fulfilling the priesthood has no meaning now. The world is about to undergo a great change. Huh. Hephaestus looked at Soraphine with some confusion and said, is this a prophecy you've made? Does the power of the seed really have the authority of prophecy? Prophecy. Soraphine gave a complex smile and said, perhaps. But seed grow from the earth, and they naturally carry a special power. Let's just watch quietly. Soraphine was very hesitant. He wasn't ready yet. He was merely a god of occurrence. Over the years, although he had been constantly increasing the presence of ice and snow's power in the world, even using part of the power of the seed to create plants like snow lotuses, frost vines, and ice flowers that could only live in ice and snow for the ice and snow authority. Although this strengthened the power of ice and snow, the gods of the world viewed the power of ice and snow more as a seasoning. Yes, a seasoning for various drinks, because ice gave the gods a cold and refreshing feeling that made them very happy. Therefore, the power of ice and snow was not strong, and his divine power was insufficient. He had no way to create a snowfall that covered the entire world to let his power influence the world. Forget it, I'll deal with whatever comes my way, I'll worry about it when the time comes. Soraphine also hadn't thought of a good way to gain more power for the time being. I really am the child of the sun god Helios. I still have the aura of the sun on me. Phaethon frantically tried to prove in the blazing sun forest that he really was the child of the sun god Helios. He was met only with the ridicule of those demons and nymphs. If you really are the child of the sun god Helios, why are you a demigod? At this moment, a blonde nymph happened to say, casually, if you really are the child of the sun god, then you should be able to drive the sun chariot. After all, only Lord Helios, the sun god, and his children can drive it. Hearing this, Phaethon said excitedly, I'll show you people. I will definitely drive the sun chariot. Afterward, he secretly came to the temple of the sun, while at that time, the sun god Helios happened to be called to the temple of thunder by Zeus to discuss the positions of the main gods. The nymphs serving the sun god Helios happened to be absent from the temple as well. The entire temple was empty. Only 6 golden sun steeds and the sun chariot remained, and the whip used to command the sun steeds happened to be hanging in the most conspicuous place on the sun chariot. Phaethon quickly ran onto the chariot, cracked the whip in his hand, and drove the sun chariot from the temple of the sun toward the sky. He then discovered that his power could resonate with the sun chariot, so he excitedly drove it, merging his divine power with the sun chariot. But he did not notice that his divine power and divinity were being burned the moment he reached the highest point of the sky. His divinity and divine power were exhausted at that moment. The night was draped in a veil of daylight. At first, it was just a few fragments of light, like scattered diamonds forgotten on black velvet, quietly streaking across the zenith. But in an instant, those sporadic bright marks turned into an overwhelming flood. Countless stars broke free from the firmament's bonds, trailing burning tails, pouring down from all directions. They were no longer ornaments of the night sky, but masters, a wild tide setting the entire heavens ablaze. Each meteor dragged a light trail, bright or dim, silver white, pale gold, even with faint blue flaming tails, weaving into a massive, constantly trembling web of light across the inky sky. Ah, What a beautiful scene. A nymph said with sparkling eyes at the rare sight. This can be called a wonder. It has begun. Sorafine said with indifference in his eyes. Save me. It's so hot. Ah tilde I can't take it. Anyone, please. Ah tilde ah tilde ah tilde it's so hot. Great sun god. Why have you abandoned your believers? Cursed sun, I curse you. I curse you to a miserable death. Sentient beings on earth prayed and pleaded while also frantically cursing the sun, blaming him for raining down so much solar fire, charring them to cinders. In the Temple of Thunder, Helios spat out a mouthful of golden divine blood. Intense pain surged from his godhead as the resentment of countless beings poured into it. Ah! Helios rolled on the ground in pain. His godhead was nearly shattered, and his divine body began to be affected by the world. If not for the immense world's favor he possessed, he would have fallen into eternal slumber in that instant. He looked toward his temple. He knew something must have gone wrong with his sun chariot, and only he and his child, Phaethon, could drive it. Because Phaethon was born weak, he had given the child a wisp of the sun's origin to protect himself or to use it to become a god. He never expected that the wisp of origin he gave away would become his death warrant. However, Helios did not blame Phaethon. Instead, his heart was full of guilt. If not for his power, Phaethon wouldn't have met such a calamity. Phaethon. Helios mutters softly. No need to think. If even he suffered such a severe backlash, Phaethon would surely be worse off. He won't survive. Only King Zeus before him. Is this your scheme? Helios closed his eyes. Zeus maintained his majestic posture, looking at Helios, giving him space to think. Finally, Helios spoke, sighing lamentably, Lord Zeus, I will voluntarily surrender my solar godhead at the next council of all gods and hand the power of the sun to you. I hope you can save my child. I alone will bear all the sins, Helios said. Good, Zeus said, just that one word, expressionless, as if everything was within his expectations. Watching the disaster, Sorafine rubbed the ice and snow in his hand and sighed, is this fate? He said to the world, I am Sorafine, master of seed, fruits, flowers, spores, gratitude, compassion, friendship, hot springs, and ice and snow. Solar fire rages on the earth, and countless lives suffer. I am willing to sacrifice my power of ice and snow to bring a snowfall upon the world, an ice and snow that covers the earth. As Sorafine's words fell, the origin of ice and snow on him began to burn. Countless snowflakes fell from the high mountains and the sky. From the moment Sorafine spoke, the power of ice and snow briefly surpassed the power of fresh waters. All water sources on earth turned into ice and snow. Rivers became glaciers, and even the coastal waters were covered in ice, spreading continuously toward the deep sea. At this time, the expression of Tethys, mother of fresh waters, was very grim. Her power of fresh waters was actually covered by ice and snow. This moment was when she was at her weakest. Yet, she couldn't even fight back. She could only watch as Sorafine's power of ice and snow eroded from the coastal waters into the deep sea step by step. It was like someone slapping your left cheek, but you had to offer your right cheek for them to hit. If you were unwilling, you would be punished. This was more disgusting than eating human excrement. On Mount Olympus, some gods mocked, to extinguish this solar fire, he burns his own origin. How utterly ridiculous. Yes, yes. How much origin does a god even have? Foolish. But this Sorafine seems to have a lot of origins, a goddess spoke up. After she spoke, the disdainful voices got stuck like a broken tape recorder. The topic ended. Meanwhile, the sleeping Gaia's eyes grew complex. Although she didn't care about the solar fire burning on her body, it would delay her recovery. Moreover, this was a price she was supposed to pay, she had expected it long ago. Yet Sorafine had sacrificed the power of ice and snow, accelerating her recovery. She looked at those amber eyes with a complex gaze, eyes that seemed to hide all things. After a long time, she said, I'm sorry. If any god heard this, they would be shocked beyond belief. The noble origin god, Gaia, mother of earth who carries the whole world, actually apologized. In fact, her previous desire for Sorafine to hand over the Fusang tree was also to revive her younger brother. It had been her obsession for millions of years. That was why she disregarded Soraphine's feelings and wanted to give the sun's power to Helios. She knew Helios would be heavily wounded now, but with the Fusong tree, he could merge with it and eventually become the father of the sun, gaining power and a more important status in the world. After that, Eros would also slowly recover as the world grew stronger. But now she realized she was wrong. Seraphine was much more outstanding than Helios and could bring a new turning point to the world. As the last wisp of Seraphine's origin of ice and snow was exhausted, the land and sea were covered in white. The power of the lives that perished within was transformed into resentment, a resentment that loomed over the earth. Especially those nymphs and demons. Nymphs and demons were the reserves of the gods. As long as there was enough power in the world, every demon and nymph would become a god. And all these demons and nymphs died beneath the solar fire. How could they not feel resentment? The resentment of a single nymph was nothing to worry about, and 10 were insignificant. Unfortunately, this was the resentment of all living beings in the entire world, and under the catalysis of Seraphine's power of ice and snow, a miraculous mutation began to occur. In the deep sea, Tethys, mother of fresh waters, gritted her teeth as she watched Seraphine in the sky, who was incessantly sowing ice and snow. She took a deep breath, looked at her daughter Dione beside her, and said, "My daughter. Now is the time for you to become a god." That fool Seraphine, to cover the entire earth and reduce the casualties of those lowly things, he actually sacrificed his own origin of ice and snow. Now that the power of ice and snow is masterless, you can seize it and make it an extension of the water source. As your mother, I have prepared a gift for you. After saying this, Tethys, with some hardtake, separated a wisp of the origin of water and integrated it into Dione's body. She would not be like Helios, letting a demigod parade around with his origin, thereby giving Zeus an opportunity to seize his priesthood and origin. Dione gritted her teeth, then nodded and looked at her mother, signaling for her to tell Dione what to do next. After Tethys told Dione all the precautions, Dione declared to the world, "The ocean is infinite, and the waters in the depths cannot freeze. I am willing to transform into the goddess of ice and water to freeze the great sea and end this disaster as quickly as possible." By the time she burned all she had to catch the world's attention, 3 months of the year had already passed. These 3 months were treated by the world as a new season, becoming Seraphine's priesthood. Furthermore, although the power of ice and snow could not condense into an origin, it was recognized by the world as a vassal of winter. At that moment, Dione's oath was heard by the world, and she successfully became the goddess of ice and water. Just as Dione was preparing to enjoy the noble status of a origin god, her expression froze. She discovered that she actually had a primary god. How could that be? She had a primary god. And it was Seraphine. The power of ice and snow had clearly been sacrificed by Seraphine, so why could he still control it? This caused the goddess of ice and water Dione's face to flush with anger. At this time, Tethys was still unaware of this and said to Dione, "Dione, how is it? Have you mastered the authority over ice and snow?" "Mother," Dione said with a very ugly expression, "I have become Seraphine's subordinate goddess." "How is that possible? He no longer has the origin of ice and snow." Logically, by using the power of the shared origin of ice and water to integrate the authority of water into ice and snow, you should have become a origin god. What is going on? Meanwhile, Seraphine, who was sensing the power of winter, had a peculiar expression on his face. He had inexplicably gained a subordinate goddess, and he could strip her of her priesthood at any time, turning this subordinate goddess back into a nymph. The moment the power of winter merged into Seraphine's body, the bottleneck between his faint divine power and medium divine power vanished silently, like a piece of rice paper dropped into water. The world solemnly announced to the gods that Seraphine had become a god of medium divine power. This was the first time since the birth of Gaia, the Mother Earth, that a god of medium divine power was announced by the world itself. This caused dissatisfaction among many gods who were stuck at the peak of faint divine power. On what grounds can this god, who is less than 1,000 years old, become a medium divine power? Logically, he shouldn't even have been able to cross the bottleneck of faint divine power. When he was first born, he was clearly only a faint divine power. Why is Seraphine shown such great favor? What does Seraphine have? Why can he become a medium divine power while we are stuck at this bottleneck? Countless voices of complaint spread cautiously through their divine senses. After all, they were also afraid of being confronted by Sorafine in person. Make no mistake, Sorafine had the ability. Hephaestus rubbed his hands together, white mist escaping his mouth as he spoke. Sorafine, you actually became a god of medium divine power. It's just that this ice and snow is too cold, can you make it a bit warmer? Sorafine shook his head and said, not really. There are still residual solar flames in the world, and these flames are still scorching the earth, so the ice and snow must remain for a while. Furthermore, as the ruler of winter, the power of winter now blankets the world. As a new beginning, I must now make the power of winter a part of the seasons. Sensing a power 100 times stronger than before, a slight smile couldn't help but cross Sorafine's lips. His ability to obtain the power of winter was the result of the right time, the right place, and the right people. He hadn't expected Gaia, the Mother Earth, to actually help him by giving winter a definition, the season for the Earth to rest. This very definition made the power of winter a step above the other three seasons. It could be said that Sorafine was now the dominant force among the four seasons. Did you foresee this? Hephaestus asked curiously. A prophecy. Sorafine hesitated for a moment and then nodded. That's right. This is the power of the seed. Following Sorafine's confirmation, the divinity of prophecy also descended from the sky and merged into Sorafine's body. At that moment, the eyes of the gods of Olympus lit up. A god of prophecy. And one personally bestowed by the world. In Olympus, there were only 1.5 gods of prophecy with such honor. Why say that? Because the only gods to have obtained such honor were Prometheus the forethinker and Métis, the goddess of wisdom who was still within Zeus's mind. They both used the power of wisdom to prophesy, whereas Sorafine prophesied through the power of fate. Of course, this group of gods would not try to kidnap Sorafine as they might have before. Instead, they wanted to cooperate with him, such as providing him with protection in exchange for his prophecies. Hephaestus's jaw nearly dropped in shock. He looked at Sorafine and said, This is actually the divinity of prophecy. You really can prophesy. At this moment, Sorafine felt this special power of prophecy. This divinity of prophecy was like a seed. It would only provide two choices, yes or no, rather than the long strings of information like Prometheus's. No matter what Sorafine wanted to prophesy, only two answers would appear, yes or no. Feeling the power of the divinity of prophecy that belonged solely to him, Sorafine's eyes lit up as he said to Hephaestus, Lord Hephaestus, my divinity of prophecy can be questioned by other life forms to yield two answers. Would you like to try? Hephaestus's eyes brightened, as he hadn't seen something like this in a long time. He then said, Sure. I'll give it a try. What do I need to do? Just ask me a question, and I will say yes or no. If it's yes, it means what you said will happen in the future. If it's no, it won't, Sorafine explained. Hephaestus asked seriously, will our friendship exist until the end of the world? The divine power within Sorafine was rapidly consumed, and then he spoke, yes, and no. Quote question mark question mark question mark quote. Hephaestus stared at Sorafine and asked again, is it because I betrayed our friendship? No, Sorafine gave the answer. Hephaestus clenched his fists and looked at Sorafine nervously, asking, is it because you betrayed our friendship? No, Sorafine said, a strange expression appearing on his face. This divinity of prophecy seemed a bit improper. Why did the answer have to be spoken aloud without any way to hide it? It had to be told to the questioner, which felt like a priesthood that could break many relationships. Hearing this answer, Hephaestus breathed a sigh of relief. But wait, if neither Sorafine nor he betrayed their friendship, why wouldn't it reach the end of the world? Will I die in the future? To Hephaestus, only death could separate their friendship. Since it didn't reach the end of the world, it must mean he died. No, Sorafine replied mechanically. Then will Sorafine die in the future? Hephaestus asked again. Yes, Sorafine said. Hephaestus had only intended to help Sorafine experiment with his priesthood, but he never expected to receive such an answer. Sorafine also hadn't expected that his future would be death, he was actually going to die. In that instant, his heart was filled with dread, but he soon calmed down. The power of prophecy changes the moment it is revealed. Since he knew his future fate, he would slowly make plans for himself to change this destiny of death. However, death did not necessarily mean eternal slumber. Perhaps in some future circumstance, death might even be a good choice. Coming from life, moving toward death, and then welcoming a new life once more in such a cycle. Hephaestus's gaze turned sharp. How can that be? You are a god of medium divine power. And you just saved the entire world. Why should you die? Which god would dare to kill you? Could the power of the prophecy be wrong? Hephaestus found it hard to believe this prediction. He had finally emerged from numbness and pain to welcome new life and flowers, yet the god who brought all this was to step into death. How unfair this was for such a god. Why would it be like this? No, I don't want you to die. Hephaestus looked deeply at Sorophine. At that moment, the power of winter grew within Sorophine's godhead, quietly turning a lock of hair on his forehead as white as snow. The world began to experience heavy, goose feather snow because of Sorophine's turbulent emotions. In that instant, the world became a vast expanse of pristine white, even the silhouette of the earth turning blurred. Fine snow fell upon Hephaestus's burning hair, turning into a wisp of white mist the moment it touched, vanishing into the air. He leaned down slightly, looking at Sorophine. How could a god who brought new possibilities to the world die? I don't want this outcome. When I asked if our friendship could reach the end of the world, I wasn't focused on the word, friendship. I was focused on us, on whether I could protect you, from the biting cold of early spring to the time ice and snow covers the world, from the birth of gods to when the world returns to silence. I was once trapped in endless numbness and pain because of my ugliness. It was you who brought the vitality of seed and broke into my barren heart, allowing beautiful flowers to reappear in a domain of deathly silence. This made me realize that a god's years are not just about pain, but also joy, Hephaestus said, recounting the past word by word. He was like a starving beggar witnessing the death of the benefactor who gave him life. That kind of feeling brought him to the brink of collapse. If described using a term from Sorophine's past life, he was a death soldier. Anyone who has a friend would never want their best friend to lose their life, which is why Hephaestus spoke those words. The wind and snow grew more intense, swirling the snow on the ground into small mounds behind them, as if wanting to treasure Hephaestus's fervent heart within this vast world. Hephaestus's fingertips tightened slightly on Sorophine's shoulder. Facing those amber eyes, he said, "You are my redemption, the seed I will protect even if I exhaust my origin. I am the god of fire. I can burn away all the gloom in the world and forge the sturdiest divine armor. I am willing to burn my entire origin of fire to sever the threads of fate for you, to melt the shackles of death for you. Even if I must pay everything, even if I fall into the endless abyss of Tartarus, I will never let you die," Hephaestus said, looking earnestly at Sorophine. A tear fell from the corner of his eye. This was his first time crying, and his first time feeling fear. He looked deeply at Sorophine and said, "Sorophine, I don't want you to leave me. Not because of the appearance you brought me, nor because of your qualities, but simply because it is you, this unique god. Don't let me lose you, okay?" Hephaestus said to Sorophine. Hephaestus, Sorophine looked seriously at the god of fire, "I will. Because I am the god of seeds. That tiny seed carries the power to rewrite the impossible." The moment Sorophine said those words, an illusory priesthood without any combat or auxiliary capabilities appeared beside him. It wasn't blurred like other priesthoods, instead, it clearly told Sorophine that its name was Redemption. Sorophine was stunned, not expecting his status in Hephaestus's heart to be so high. He looked seriously at Hephaestus and said, "Prophecy is merely an indication of fate, but the reason gods are gods is that they are never controlled by fate, but have the courage to rewrite it." Snowflakes fell upon Sorophine and Hephaestus. Half were melted by Hephaestus's warmth, while the other half landed on Sorophine's head, forming an ice and snow crown for him. Sorophine looked up to see a world of ice and snow. Perhaps one day in the future, I will welcome death. But before that, we should enjoy the process of chasing hope and rewriting fate, shouldn't we? The moment Sorophine finished speaking, every seed in the world emitted a faint light. These glimmers were like miracles. One might be insignificant, but gathered together, they possess the power to change everything. After all, a miracle defies logic, it can turn the impossible into the possible. Hearing Soraphine's words, Hephaestus's heart settled for some unknown reason. To him, Soraphine's life was more valuable than his own. Like those historical figures from Soraphine's past life who would give their lives to repay a single meal's kindness, a unique quality radiated from him. All right, I will accompany you to change fate, just like when you brought me out of that endless darkness, Hephaestus said, looking at Soraphine earnestly. Thank you, Lord Hephaestus. As those words were spoken, Soraphine's heart also settled. This kind of life was quite good. At the very least, he had seen scenery he had never witnessed before, and his heart was filled with vitality. Since he had foreseen death, he would find ways to strengthen himself, making even the primordial gods need him and binding the interests of all gods to his person. That way, no god would want to see him die. Becoming a god of medium divine power was only a starting point, there was still a long road ahead. Right then, the bell of the Pantheon rang, calling an emergency council of all gods. He had originally wanted to experiment with his winter priesthood, but since the council of all gods had been convened, he had to attend first. After all, this was an agreement among the gods of Olympus. Soraphine spoke softly, I'm going to attend the council of all gods. Hephaestus, we'll talk when I return. After all, this is the agreement of the Olympian gods. I'm going too, Hephaestus said with a look of determination. Soraphine raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected Hephaestus to be willing to attend this session of the Council of All Gods. I also want to see those two incompetent parents and see their reaction when they see me, Hephaestus said seriously. I hope they won't regret throwing away such a powerful and handsome god like you, Soraphine joked. Soraphine and Hephaestus tacitly avoided mentioning the prophecy of his certain death in the future again. Although Soraphine had experienced so much, not much time had actually passed. At this moment, some gods who hadn't even reached home yet were grumbling, why is there another meeting starting already? These years are so annoying, that incompetent sun god Helios. My temple was first burned by fire and then covered by ice and snow. I've had enough. I'm moving into the earth. I don't believe anyone would dare cause trouble on the body of Mother Gaia. I haven't even made it back to my temple and a meeting is called. My nymphs, my demons, my beauties. No. Meanwhile, Soraphine arrived at the council of all gods, bringing the god of fire, Hephaestus, with him. The gods looked at the handsome deity behind Soraphine with great curiosity. Only a few who had felt Hephaestus's divine aura showed expressions of disbelief. When King Zeus and God Queen Hera, who were always the last to arrive, showed up, they seemed unable to believe their eyes upon seeing the god of fire, Hephaestus, beside Soraphine. However, their expressions quickly returned to normal, as if the god of fire, Hephaestus, was just an ordinary god. At that moment, Hermes, the god of thieves and commerce, wore a meaningful smile, glancing at the still smirking Ares and the goddess of marriage, Hera, who sat on the queen's throne. Oh, great Prince Soraphine, master of winter and seeds. Who is that god beside you? He carries a dense power of fire and seems mixed with the aura of countless divine artifacts. Such a god is truly unfamiliar, Hermes asked with a smile. His tone was very gentle, as if he were just asking casually in passing. But this one sentence focused the gaze of all the gods onto Hephaestus. The staff in Queen Hera's hand was gripped tightly, but her expression remained unchanged, as if this matter had nothing to do with her. Zeus also wore a smile, leaning back on his divine throne without a single thought. Hephaestus sneered and did not answer. He hadn't wanted to come to the Pantheon in the first place, he only came because Soraphine was attending this meeting. Soraphine's eyes narrowed. He hadn't yet settled the score with this god of thieves for Solier, the god of rolling stones, exposing his identity earlier, and now he was at it again. The sun god Helios leaves the stage, and you just step right up, don't you? Does this have anything to do with you? Is he your primary god? You're paying him so much attention. Soraphine said coldly. The expression on Hermes's face shifted slightly, but a smile quickly returned. It's just that an unknown god has suddenly appeared in the Pantheon, which makes me a bit curious. Especially since this lord's aura is so similar to Lord Ares's. Ares chimed in at this point. Now that Hermes mentions it, the aura on him really is like mine. Could he be a god of war too? Looking at Ares's foolish appearance, Hera frowned, then glanced at Athena sitting in Zeus's row. It seemed she needed to find an opportunity for Athena and Ares to marry. As long as she helped, Ares would surely be able to share half of Athena's wisdom, which would make up for his deficiencies. Athena seemed to sense something and returned a meaningful smile to Hera. Because he is your elder brother, Hermes said with a wicked grin, his prank successful. I have such a handsome brother. Ares foolishly rubbed his muscle-filled brain, then looked at Hera and asked, Mother, when did you give birth to an older brother for me? Hebe, the goddess of youth and maidens sitting beside Hera, bit her lip. Mother, could he be? Indeed, Hera said, stroking Hebe's head. She looked at Hephaestus with a complex gaze and said, Long time no see, my eldest son, Hephaestus, the god of fire and forging. Long time no see. Hephaestus sneered. We've only met once, the day I was born, the day I was thrown off Olympus. My mother, the forever noble Queen Hera. Seeing the tense atmosphere between Hera and Hephaestus, Hestia, the goddess of home and hearth, sighed. However, she immediately began thinking of ways to ease the relationship between Hera and Hephaestus. After all, Hephaestus was a member of the family, and she wanted to maintain family stability. Meanwhile, the pantheon erupted into an uproar, with everyone looking at Hephaestus in disbelief. How is it possible? How could Hephaestus be so handsome? I saw him 3,000 years ago. That's right, that's right. I remember him being a god with a strange temper and an ugly appearance. I feel like vomiting just looking at him. The god who said this didn't use divine sense to communicate, but spoke out loud subconsciously. Hephaestus gave a cold snort, and a streak of flame burned upon him. Ah! This miserable scream successfully reduced the gods' chatter and made them distance themselves from this unlucky fellow. After all, stupidity is contagious. They were all communicating via divine sense, yet this genius spoke directly, and right in front of the person involved. Truly impressive. Only a few gods, including Athena, Aphrodite, and Hera, who knew the effects of the priesthood, were not surprised. Aphrodite blew a kiss directly to Sorophine and said, Dear Prince Sorophine, if you like me, you can come find me at the Temple of Love and Beauty. Don't give my face and body to other gods. Having said that, she also winked, putting on a cute expression. Sorophine felt a surge in his heart, a faint blush appeared on his face, and his eyes became hazy. The priesthood of friendship shook, and Sorophine snapped back to his senses, his eyes filled with wariness. He had actually fallen into Aphrodite's aura of lust just now. As expected of one of the powers of the primordial god Eros. Seeing Sorophine regain his composure so quickly, Aphrodite was full of surprise. Even Zeus would take a while to break free from the grasp of lust, yet he did it so fast. At this moment, Sorophine wrapped himself in the divine power of ice and snow and said to the goddess of love and beauty, Aphrodite, Goddess Aphrodite, I will not use your face casually. For every god who seeks me to change their face, their appearance will merge with the world's origin to give birth to a new face. Hearing this, Aphrodite smiled. Good. This answer satisfied many gods. After all, they didn't want their faces appearing on some nymph, leading to games of true and false goddess. Very well. When you have time, come to my temple of love. I will give you an unforgettable joy, Aphrodite said with a smile. Sorophine was on high alert. He didn't want to be tamed like a dog. After all, there were so many examples before him. Love makes gods foolish, love makes gods blind, and love makes people humble and desperate. Thinking of this, Sorophine glanced at Selene. This goddess had her lunar origin split away because of love. There were other gods who suffered heavy losses because of love, some even losing their origins. Especially the goddess before him who toyed with love, she seemed even more licentious than Zeus, but that was just her appearance. To be able to become the mother body of a primordial god, her abilities were top-notch. Otherwise, how could Gaia have allowed her to appear on Olympus? Especially since this goddess was born only tens of thousands of years before him and had already become a god of medium divine power. This speed was already the most elite among the gods, second only to Sorophine. Most of the world's gods were attracted by the priesthood of love and beauty, yet failed to notice the rapid expansion of her divine power level. All right, once I have fulfilled the duties of my priesthood, I will come find you when I have time, Sorophine replied. Given Sorophine's diligence, going to Aphrodite's temple would be a long time from now, perhaps not until he became the most powerful god in this world. I'll be waiting for you Tilda, Aphrodite said, full of charm. Even without any divine power enhancement, she incited heat and desire in the hearts of many gods, regardless of gender. Meanwhile, Sorophine used the power of ice and snow to freeze the inexplicable fire of lust that had flared up in his heart. After Aphrodite and Sorophine finished their exchange, Ares scratched his head and said, I remember Hephaestus was very ugly, wasn't he? How did he become so handsome? The gods ignored Ares, focusing solely on Hera and Hephaestus. Hera stood up, slowly descended from her throne, and looked at Hephaestus, saying, I am so sorry, my dear child, my eldest son, Hephaestus. I have always prayed for your return. Hephaestus sneered and said coldly, there's no need to lower yourself so much. This tactic has already been used by a certain goddess. You truly are mother and daughter. Huh. Hera was stunned. Her mother had met Hephaestus. However, she quickly realized that Hephaestus was referring to her foster mother, the ruler of water sources, Tethys. You misunderstand. I truly want you to return to Olympus. In the past, because I was the god queen, a noble deity could not apologize to those under her rule. Even if there was a mistake, it was Hera who was wrong, while the god queen is always right. Queen Hera took another step, now only 7 paces away from Hephaestus. So, in what capacity are you apologizing to me? Hephaestus said indifferently. As a mother, Hera said seriously, taking another step, now 6 paces from Hephaestus. Mother. Hephaestus spoke as if he had heard something unbelievable, saying disdainfully, the moment you threw me off the cliff, you ceased to be a fit mother. That is why I am making amends. I want to compensate for the pain you've suffered all these years. Hera took another step, her eyes filled with sorrow and earnestness. She was now only 5 paces from Hephaestus. You had 10,000 ways to make amends. Why wait until I came to the Pantheon to say this? Hephaestus asked, his tone cold yet carrying a hint of hesitation. Because I am the god queen. Hera was wrong, but the god queen was not. Oh, how much I wanted to come find you, my child. Hera took another step. I will give you the glory of a main god. Hera took another step. I will make you an existence in Olympus second only to Zeus and myself. I will give you everything you desire. Hera took another step. Forgive me, will you? Hephaestus. Hera took another step. She was now just one short step away from Hephaestus's intimate distance. Do you think I care for these things? The Hephaestus of the past wanted them, but that Hephaestus died in the volcano. The Hephaestus who stands here now is different, Hephaestus said gently, looking toward Sorophine. I am sincere. I regret what I did, Hera said. Hephaestus looked at Hera coldly. He would not believe the words of a mother who had abandoned her child. He thought of a way to make Hera give up, so he said, all the gods of the world know that Sorophine has become the god of prophecy, and his prophecies can only yield 2 answers, yes, or no. I will ask Sorophine. If the answer is no, then speak no more of making amends. Thus, Hephaestus said to Sorophine, is Hera's feeling for me genuine? Sorophine said. A flicker of embarrassment crossed Sorophine's face, but it was quickly replaced by determination. As a friend, he would definitely stand by Hephaestus's side. After all, he wasn't well acquainted with Hera. Even if Hera were to retaliate against him later, he would not hesitate. Then, Sorophine gave his answer. It is, and it isn't. Hey, Hephaestus sneered, looking at Hera and saying, did you hear that? Noble Lady Hera, great mistress of Olympus, Sorophine's divinity of prophecy has spoken. It is, and it isn't. Are you trying to make amends to me? You've seen my change, haven't you? Since his transformation, Hephaestus had found that the world's perception of him had completely shifted. When he was ugly, the gods of the world loathed him immensely, as did humanity. He had even tried to cultivate followers, but upon seeing his hideous appearance, not a single human was willing to believe in him. But when his appearance changed, the world's deities changed, and their feelings toward him changed as well. They no longer felt disgust. The attitude of humans was the same. Now, simply by standing there, he could harvest a continuous stream of the power of faith. What a stark contrast. Hera's inconsistent attitude was truly ironic. Because he was ugly, she threw him off the cliff. Because he was ugly, she refused to even look at him. Now that he had become handsome, she clung to him, wanting to make amends. What a ridiculous world. Yet this was how the world had been since the fall of Eros. Love and beauty were both vassals of Eros. How could this world not emphasize beauty? Hera narrowed her eyes, glanced at Sorophine, and then explained to Hephaestus, "My dear eldest son, Hephaestus, god of fire, I am sorry. But the world is just like this. At the moment you were born, I felt only a thin sense of affection, which is why I threw you off the cliff without hesitation. Because there wasn't much emotion between us, and at that time, Zeus's infidelity caused my divinity to shatter, leaving me in agonizing pain. That is why I did such a thing," Hera continued. "And so, what are you trying to say?" Hephaestus said coldly. "I want to tell you that any love comes with a price. It's just like my love for Ares, Hebe, and Eileithyia, which is a familial love brought about by long-term companionship," Hera said. "I want you to return, partly because of my guilt and love for you, and partly because of your power, the value you have demonstrated," Hera said. Though it was cruel to say, as God Queen, she could only act this way. She was the noble queen, her children could be unwise or weak, but they could absolutely not be an anomaly. The ugly Hephaestus had been such an anomaly. That was why Hera had abandoned him then, and why she was seeking him out now. Seeing Hera's humble appearance, Zeus frowned. She was the god queen, showing such an expression before all the gods already diminished her nobility. Zeus stood up and slowly faced Hephaestus, saying, "My child, Hephaestus, this is our first meeting. Yes, compared to Hera, you are an even more incompetent father," Hephaestus sneered. "I know my own incompetence, even my inaction." "Why?" Zeus said calmly. "Because to me and to Hera, you were a massive trouble, devoid of value or interest. It is just like you and Sorophine. If Sorophine had no value to you, and you had no value to Sorophine, you would never have known each other in your entire lives," Zeus said slowly. Hephaestus's anger gradually subsided. He knew Zeus was right, and he knew why Sorophine had come looking for him. He had known from the very beginning. Sorophine had sought him out for that wisp of origin essence left in his body by Tethys. To create ice and snow, to create the current winter. And his willingness to sacrifice for Sorophine was because Sorophine could withstand the pressure from Tethys, mother of the vast sea, to heal his disabilities and change his appearance. One could say his friendship with Sorophine began with interests. No deity will be good to another for no reason. If they are, it is because that deity possesses something they need. Zeus took Hera's hand, releasing his pressure to display the nobility of the god queen. "So, was my abandonment inevitable?" Hephaestus said softly. "If you sat in my position, or Hera's position, you would not have made a different choice, Hephaestus," Zeus replied. Hephaestus clenched his fists tightly. He had to admit Zeus was right. If he had fathered a child for whom he felt no emotion, and that child was a massive burden, he would also discard that child. Return to Olympus. There will always be a place for you among the 12 main gods. And with such a position, you can help Sorophine seize my throne as God King, can't you? Zeus said to Hephaestus. He did not use emotion, but only interests to persuade Hephaestus. It must be said that Zeus's tactic worked. Although Hephaestus didn't care about the position, he could return to Olympus for the sake of his friend. Interests. Friendship. Hephaestus's mind was in a mess. He didn't know what to say. Under Zeus's royal authority, he had no way to lie. Sorophine spoke up at this moment. Any relationship begins with interests, but it transcends them, just as new things are born from the old and then surpass them. I admit, I went looking for Lord Hephaestus because he could bring me immense and abundant power. At least half the power I possess is related to Lord Hephaestus, Sorophine said, looking at Hephaestus. But we have experienced so much, through the transitions of countless priesthoods and fulfilling our duties together. Thus, we brought forth endless joy and freedom, and finally, friendship was born. Sorafine continued. This cannot be conflated with mere interests. Sorafine said, looking at Zeus. If there is no soil of interests, how can the seed of friendship take root and sprout? Friendship and interests can never be separated. Friendship divorced from interests is like a rootless tree, it will eventually wither, Zeus said calmly. Do you admit it? Zeus pressed Sorafine. Zeus's words left the god speechless, successfully reclaiming face for Hera. I admit it, Sorafine said softly. I have said it before, but eternal friendship will not be worn away by interests. Instead, with the passage of time, it will become more mellow, just like wine, Sorafine said. Hopefully, Zeus said meaningfully. When you encounter immense interests, will you turn against each other? Sorafine's words successfully helped Hephaestus escape his internal conflict. Indeed, even if it started from interests, what did it matter? It was enough that they were best friends now. They would be good friends in the future too. Hephaestus said, the friendship between us will only be separated by death. This is the prophecy made by Sorafine. Zeus was somewhat surprised that friendship could last so long, but he still looked at Hephaestus with a smile and said, then what is your choice? For friendship, or for that little bit of personal spite? Hera lost all face for your sake. You've vented that bit of spite in your heart, haven't you? Zeus explained to the gods, she has never been so humiliated before the gods. If it were purely for interests, she would not have had to do that. She could have completely used a trade of interests to make you return. The reason she was so humiliated is that there is still a part of love in her heart. These words made Hera feel very conflicted. Zeus's words successfully transformed her humiliated appearance into the love in her heart. Not only did it not affect Hera's noble image, but it even added a touch of maternal love. This was a powerful authority on Sorafine second only to Seed. How could Zeus not pay attention to it? His previous actions had been hurting her, yet he defended her when she was humiliated. Drawing me close, then letting me go. Hera's heart was a whirlpool of emotions. She felt she was going crazy, actually being able to accept Zeus's infidelity now and believing that everything Zeus had done in the past could be forgiven. Sorafine smiled slightly and said nothing, simply looking at Zeus like that. At this moment, Demeter's gaze was very complex. She felt very guilty toward Hera, but she would always stand by Sorafine's side. Because Sorafine was her first child, the child she had watched grow up. She had seen him grow from a weak god of seeds into the powerful ruler of winter he was now, a being favored by the world. This was a joy she had never experienced in the past. She had never imagined that watching the life of a god could be so blissful and happy. Hera looked at Sorafine, then at Demeter, her eyes full of complexity and pain. She was the god queen, the goddess of marriage, and Demeter's younger sister. She hated Sorafine because his birth had caused an irreparable crack in her godhead, but she loved Demeter because she was the sister who had accompanied her for tens of millions of years. But this sister was standing on the side of her child. What should she do? Hephaestus broke the deadlock. He glanced at Sorafine, then at Hera, his expression complex, before saying to Zeus, you have successfully persuaded me. But I will not become one of you, I am only an independent main god. Hephaestus gave Hera a complex look. Zeus's words had also caused ripples in Hephaestus's heart. That is enough, isn't it? Zeus said with a smile. He glanced at the somewhat timid Hebe, the goddess of youth. This cowardly goddess might also be able to stir the softness in Hephaestus's heart. After all, youth was also an adjunct to a power Sorafine was about to master. Not to make Hephaestus lean toward them, but just to let Hephaestus have a bit of affection for Hebe was enough. Alright, our family matters are settled. Now it's time to discuss official business. Zeus looked at Helios, who was sitting on the sun throne like a quail. He no longer had his former arrogance. Lord Helios, Zeus said with a smile, I wonder how the death of all things in this world should be accounted for. I remember you promised to hand over the sun's origin as compensation. Zeus's words shocked the gods. Since when was Helios so generous that he would offer compensation? Helios lowered his head, looking at Zeus with a complex gaze. He was covered in the shackles of the world and could no longer drive the sun chariot. After all, what his child Phaethon had done had burned a large number of gods to death. Didn't they see that many gods were missing from this pantheon? Although humans, plants, animals, and even nymphs and demons were almost all dead, if it were just these, Helios wouldn't have received such a severe punishment. But the fire of the sun had burned to death all the river gods and mountain spring goddesses on the earth. These river gods and mountain spring goddesses were very weak. As long as their rivers and springs dried up, they were no different from ordinary nymphs and demons. The deaths of these river gods and mountain spring goddesses were the most serious matter. This was the reason the world gave Helios such a severe punishment. Because humans, including animals and plants, could be recreated at will without the world's intervention, even demigods who could become gods were the same. But at the level of a god, even the weakest river gods and mountain spring goddesses required the participation of the world's power. Without the addition of the world's power, a god is not a god. Helios, to whom do you wish to give the sun's origin? Zeus looked straight at Apollo. Although Zeus left the choice to Helios, there seemed to be no choice. He was looking at Apollo, his god of light. At this moment, Apollo's fists were clenched tight, his eyes filled with excitement. This was the sun priesthood. Once he obtained this priesthood, he could finally subdue a part of light. He was about to step onto the stage of the ruler of the light pantheon. However, if Apollo had seen the temple of Erebus, god of darkness, he would definitely not have entertained such thoughts. Meanwhile, Sorophine frowned. He needed the sun's origin to nourish the Fusang tree. Without the sun's origin, the Fusang tree could not grow. Thinking of this, however, there was still a chance. Just as Helios was about to choose Apollo, Sorophine raised his head and said, Lord Helios, too many living beings in the world were burned to death by you. Their resentment is gathering in the ice and snow. How do you think this matter should be resolved? Sorophine looked toward the earth. The resentment of countless burned souls was being collected by the remaining seed on the earth, and it was still accumulating more and more. It was building up with the resentment of the dead river gods and mountain spring goddesses as its core. Sorophine's words shifted the atmosphere of the gathering. Originally, the authority over the sun belonged to Apollo, but now, a hint of uncertainty had emerged. Oh, what do you intend to do? Zeus raised an eyebrow, looking at Sorophine's amber eyes, which even the authority of winter could not alter. I once used the residual power from the nymphs scorched by Helios to create a new plant. No, it should be called a divine plant, Sorophine said. When Sorophine spoke the term divine plant, the world deemed it a fitting title. Thus, the seed of the world tree and the Fusang tree no longer carried the title of divine artifacts, but instead stood independently as divine plants. Of course, there are not many divine plants currently. There are only 4 types: the golden apple tree, the world tree, the Fusang tree, and the friendship peach tree. Zeus's expression changed. As the king of gods, he learned from the world the effects of the Fusang tree. It could actually create a new sun, while the world tree could bear new small worlds. These 2 powerful divine plants had an unparalleled effect on the world, allowing it to possess subsidiary small worlds. Furthermore, gods and kings of gods could be born within these small worlds. One could say that a small world was essentially a miniature Olympus. The gaze Athena directed at Sorophine was also filled with fervor. Endless small worlds, endless potential. Apollo also realized the significance of this matter. The essence of the sun belonged to Helios, and no one could take it away, only he could voluntarily surrender it. This was the reason why Gaia had tried to force Sorophine to surrender the Fusang tree, because even Gaia had no way to strip away Helios's authority over the sun. It was simpler to make Sorophine hand over the Fusang tree. Now that Helios had chosen to surrender the essence of the sun, this essence was an indispensable nutrient for the Fusang tree. One could say that a massive conflict had arisen between Sorophine and him. As the creator and owner of the Fusang tree, he controlled everything about it, but he also needed the Fusang tree to grow. Therefore, he either needed a stable supply of the sun's essence or he would have to cede the Fusang tree to other gods. And a stable supply of the sun's essence required the sun god's priesthood. Thus, Sorophine had no choice but to compete with him for the sun god's priesthood. Apollo also considered this, and his expression turned quite ugly. He had not expected that his very first step in taking control of the light pantheon would encounter such a problem. Let us first resolve the resentment of these living beings. Without the gathering power of my seed, this resentment will only continue to accumulate, eventually running rampant across the land and inciting the wrath of Gaia, Sorafine said, not continuing that topic but instead shifting to the hatred of these living beings. The gods could not help but frown. What was wrong with this Sorafine? Why did he always bring up topics concerning gods they could not refuse to discuss? Gaia was a matter they could not avoid discussing. This resentment toward the sun is about to transform into a new priesthood. As the one who avenges them, I should possess this authority. Every month, the resentment from the sun will strip away a portion of the sun's essence to serve as nutrients for the Fusang tree, giving birth to a sun that will never cause destructive harm, Sorafine said loudly. As Sorafine's words connected with the world. By all rights, this method was far too forced. Although Sorafine had collected the resentment of almost all living beings, he had not completed the final step, judging Helios, the sun god. Although Sorafine could be considered to be judging him now, it had ultimately not been completed. Yet, the world still made an exception for Sorafine. After all, how many new possibilities had Sorafine brought to the world since his birth? Moreover, Sorafine himself represented miracles. That was correct. He represented miracles, but miracles were not a priesthood, they existed within every tiny seed. When the authority of seeds enveloped the world, miracles would also envelop the world. When Sorafine finished speaking, the solar eclipse divinity appeared and merged into Sorafine's godhood, and its effect was exactly as Sorafine had said. Each time, it would strip away a portion of the sun's essence to serve as nutrients for the Fusang tree. Although this authority had appeared, it had strict limitations. It could only be used once a month, and at most 1% could be stripped away. This was precisely the time it took for the sun's essence to recover. Furthermore, it could not be used to attack any other origin god. It could only be used against the wielder of the sun's authority. The moment the solar eclipse divinity appeared, Nyx, deep in the underworld, opened her eyes and frowned, very displeased. Why? When my child was born with the authority of death, was it split in two, yet Sorafine is allowed to strip away essence. That was correct. If one looked at the effects of the solar eclipse, it belonged to the subsidiary of the authority of death. However, the gods of death had all been split. There was no such thing as a death pantheon, and the world would not allow the birth of a god capable of killing a origin god. Because any origin god belonged to an important part of the world, just like a human's eyes, muscles, brain, or limbs, while entities like the river gods were like hair or eyelashes, although they were also a part, they were the unimportant parts. When a god of death was born, cutting off a leg today and chopping off an arm the day after tomorrow, how could a normal person allow such a thing to exist within their body? Yet now, the world had made an exception for Sorafine, giving birth to a power of death and restriction that targeted only one type of authority. Zeus stood up in shock, staring fixedly at Sorafine. How is this possible? This was the first time Zeus had lost his composure so completely. He had always appeared to have victory in his grasp, always appeared calm, but now he could not maintain his expression. Very well, Lord Apollo, do you still want the sun god's priesthood? Sorafine said with a smile. The sun god's priesthood had never been Sorafine's goal. This priesthood required one to work 24/7 just like the gods of the underworld, which was too much of a waste of time. He was already starting to choose to form a pantheon, distributing his unimportant authorities to act as proxies for his priesthood duties. If he had to add another 12 hours of duty time, how could he live? He obtained the solar eclipse divinity. Apollo obtained the sun god's priesthood. As long as he came to take a bit of the sun's essence every month, everyone would be happy. Sorafine did not need to perform the duties of the priesthood, and Apollo obtained the authority. Apollo also had not expected that Sorafine would actually give up this authority. Although it would mean losing a bit of essence, so what? As long as he became the master of the sun, what did it matter? In any case, the sun was only his stepping stone. His true power had never been revealed before the gods. Only his sister, Ar, knew a little, but not much. Even though Sorafine was now so dazzling and radiant, Apollo was confident he could surpass him. However, what needed to be said still had to be said. Apollo's gaze toward Helios softened, as did his tone, as he said softly, "Thank you for your gift, Prince Helios." Helios didn't even spare Apollo a glance. He directly condensed the sun's source, along with the world's punishment against him, into the source and threw it to Apollo. With the stripping away of the sun's authority, his divine power dropped from medium divine power to occurrence, but his powerful aura still made many gods who wanted to take Helios as a male pet reconsider. Even if Helios's strength was severely crippled, he was still not someone they could covet. Helios stared directly at Zeus on the god king's throne and said, "It's time to fulfill your promise, King Zeus of Olympus. Hand over the soul of my child, Phaethon." "Of course," Zeus said with a smile, tossing a sphere of light to Helios. "Within this sphere of light slept the soul of a demon. I naturally keep my promises. Furthermore, I use the God King's authority to baptize him, turning him into a demon. You can now separate a portion of your own authority to let him become a god," Zeus explained. Hearing Zeus's words, Helios's gaze softened considerably, no longer filled with his previous anger. Both demigods and demons can become gods, but the biggest difference between a demon and a demigod is the possession of human blood. Moreover, demigods can only become origin gods, whereas demons can become gods by relying on other priesthoods, even the weakest ones like river gods or mountain spring goddesses. When Phaethon was born, Helios almost thought he had been cuckolded. Had he not sensed the aura of the sun and his own unique mark within Phaethon's soul, he truly would have believed it. This was also why Helios had always been curious. Why would a child born of two gods be a demigod? At the very least, it should have been a demon or a nymph. Unfortunately, with the loss of the sun's authority, he would never be able to uncover the secrets surrounding Phaethon. This might be the greatest ability of the goddess of fame to have grown to this point. She could be Phaethon's mother, or she might not be. At this moment, all the gods were happy, except for Clymene, the goddess of fame, who had once had a one-night stand with Helios. She was terrified that her secret would be exposed. The secret within Phaethon held the key to her future authority. If Soraphine's authority of seeds weren't so powerful, she wouldn't be worried at all. But now that Soraphine was too powerful, she feared that what she had plotted for over 100,000 years would only serve to benefit him. Fortunately, Soraphine paid no mind to Phaethon, instead focusing on digesting the benefits brought by the solar eclipse divinity. His Fusang tree had also sprouted its first leaf and begun to grow. As Helios walked out of the temple, the council of all gods came to a close. Wait a moment, Prince Soraphine, and Sister Demeter, who was about to leave the pantheon, stiffened. Then, she continued her steps. Wait, Sister Demeter. Hera's voice was very soft, like a lark singing. Demeter stopped and turned around, a trace of shame flashing across her face. Hera, is there something the matter? Could I invite you and Prince Soraphine to the temple of marriage? Hera asked. Demeter glanced at Soraphine. After a moment's hesitation, Soraphine nodded in agreement. In any case, Soraphine was now very important to the world, so even if Hera had some scheme, he could still retreat safely with his mother. Upon arriving at the temple of marriage, a divine power enveloped the entire temple. Hera, is there something you want to say to me and Soraphine? Demeter took a deep breath to calm her emotions. Soraphine was also very nervous. It was coming. I'm sorry, sister. To Demeter's surprise, Hera's first words were an apology. She had expected verbal abuse, grievances, but everything except an apology from Hera. This apology made Soraphine raise an eyebrow. This god queen did not match the rumors spread across the mortal world. On the earth, it was said that Hera was a short-tempered, jealous god queen, with a strong vengeful streak, a heavy desire for power, and a cold, ungrateful nature. It seemed the rumors differed from reality. At this thought, Soraphine's eyes narrowed slightly. The reputations of both the god king and the god queen seemed poor on the earth. Was some god pushing this narrative? Hera, this. For a moment, Demeter was at a loss. She looked at Hera in panic and said, why are you apologizing to me? You. Sister, I learned from Zeus the reason why you wanted a child, Hera said gently. Zeus said your power was far too weak, and there were rumors among the gods that your position as a main god was undeserved. So, you wanted a powerful child to protect you, right? Hera took Demeter's hand and asked. They seemed to have returned to the moment they were first reborn from their father Cronus's belly. Hera had taken Demeter's hand just like this, whispering in her ear, "Don't be afraid, our younger brother has come to save us." Seraphine quietly stepped back a few paces, giving his mother and Hera some space. Hera hadn't come to settle scores with his mother, but rather to mend their relationship. Yes. Demeter's lips trembled as she spoke the word. She wanted to be strong, she didn't want to be a burden, unable to do anything but watch her siblings fight on the front lines while she sat in the rear performing insignificant healing. So when Zeus approached her, a hint of joy had actually surfaced in her heart. It was that very joy that turned into guilt after Seraphine was born. I'm sorry, Hera. I shouldn't have united with Zeus, but I don't regret it. Demeter looked toward Seraphine and said, because I have my most precious child. His birth allowed me to feel the love of a mother. Hera, do you know? Demeter's manner of confiding in Hera made it seem as if they had returned to those days after defeating the second-generation god King Cronus, when they shared everything. For the first time, I felt happiness. Even just watching a god fulfill their priesthood is a kind of happiness. Suddenly, Demeter snapped back to reality. Now was not the time when she and Hera shared everything. Her current identity was Seraphine's mother, not just Hera's elder sister. So, she stopped talking. Hera gently stroked Demeter's hand and said, "It's okay, sister. Continue, I will listen, just like in the days of old." Demeter's eyes held hesitation, but when she thought of how Seraphine still had to grow up in Olympus, she reconsidered. Rather than hiding it, it was better to lay everything out at once. I feel joy and love from him, and he returns a unique love to me. He is my everything now. I don't need a husband, I don't need pleasure, I don't need romance, but I need him. Demeter gripped Hera's hand tightly, her eyes filled with determination. Hearing Demeter's words, Seraphine's eyes grew complex. His mother could give up everything for him, but he had more than just a mother. He had friends, and in the future, perhaps a partner and his own children. Was he truly worthy of this love? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Sister, we used to tell each other everything. When did you start thinking of me as a sister unworthy of your trust? Hera's tone was full of dissatisfaction. Yet, this dissatisfaction was not because of the deception, but because of the lack of trust. My sister, I am the goddess of marriage. Hera emphasized the word, marriage, heavily. I know about every one of Zeus's affairs, I can even sense the aura of the other party's divine power. So, Demeter looked at Hera in shock. That's right. I knew from the very first moment you began with Zeus. Hera looked at Demeter with complex eyes. I kept thinking you would tell me afterward. I waited and waited. Didn't you notice that during the 1,000 years you were gestating Seraphine, I remained in the temple of marriage? I'm sorry. Demeter lowered her head. Later, Seraphine was born, and everything was on the right track. Seraphine is a origin god. I had no way to execute a primordial. At that point, you should have come to me. A trace of disappointment flashed in Hera's eyes. It's a pity that you still didn't come to find me. I watched you walk into Hestia's temple, and Zeus's temple. When Hera said this, her tone held a hint of grievance. You would rather go to that promiscuous guy Zeus than face me. Why? Am I that unworthy of your trust? It was like that with Leto, and it's like that with you too. As Hera said this, a tear of grievance fell. Why won't you come to me? The pain in my godhood doesn't even amount to 1/10,000th of the pain caused by your avoidance. Hera lowered her head, tears falling one by one onto the white marble floor. I gave you my unconditional trust. I have always helped Sister Hestia maintain this fractured family. Why do you treat me this way? By the end, Hera was even roaring. My love for you surpasses my love for my own children. Hera's exquisite makeup was ruined by hot tears. Seeing Hera in such a disheveled state, Demeter fell silent. Hera was the youngest of the three sisters, yet it had always been her taking care of Demeter and Sister Hestia. Even in battle, Hera always rushed to the front, standing side by side with Zeus. In their daily lives after battles, it was the same. Originally, she had only obtained one golden apple, but the golden apple tree should have belonged to Hera. However, because Demeter's strength was too weak, Hera gave the branch of the golden apple tree to her, hoping it would further her agricultural priesthood, while Hera only took the golden apple bestowed by the Earth Mother. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to face you. You have always stood in front of me, shielding me from the wind and rain, yet I have caused you irreparable harm. Demeter lowered her head. I have always been like this. When things happen, I always wait for you to protect me. When I encounter danger, I always subconsciously run away. Running away isn't wrong, and waiting for others to protect you isn't wrong, sister. Hera's eyes held a hint of pity. What's wrong is cowardice, and what's wrong is your lack of trust. Even now, I only wanted an apology from your heart, not an, I'm sorry, that appeared out of cowardice. Hera glanced at Seraphine. Because I was afraid you wouldn't be willing to come, I even had Seraphine come to the temple. If I were to make a move, he also has the ability to protect you. Sister, don't you understand yet? Hera's last sentence even carried a note of grievance. Demeter shed tears, finally shedding that tear from the heart. She had previously been filled with guilt and cowardice, but now they were finally swept away. I'm sorry, my sister, Hera. I shouldn't have hidden things from you, and I shouldn't have avoided you. Demeter closed her eyes and hugged Hera tightly. Deep within the temple, a goddess sighed and lowered her head. It was Hestia, the goddess of home and hearth, who had long since left the pantheon. She was actually in Hera's temple. I'm sorry, Hera, Hestia said softly. It was truly unexpected. The youngest, Hera, had taken on the responsibility of caring for the family, and while Demeter was the goddess of agriculture, she had become a goddess of healing. Meanwhile, Hestia, as the eldest sister, had only tried to smooth things over, not knowing how to face their chaotic family relations. It's okay, I have always been here. I am a Valkyrie, after all. I will always protect you, sister, Hera said, hugging Demeter. The gods of the world only knew that marriage was Hera's symbol, but they had forgotten that she was once a Valkyrie, too. When Hestia and Demeter were helpless before powerful enemies, it was she who used her companion golden staff to open up the unknown path ahead, bit by bit. It was precisely because of this pioneering that the priesthood of the Valkyrie was born amidst endless wars, although with the birth of Ares, this essence merged into war itself. But this did not mean that Hera's martial strength had weakened. On the contrary, she might have become even stronger over time, so she was fully qualified to say that she would protect Demeter. In Olympus, the only ones with the ability to defeat her were Zeus, and perhaps, Seraphine. Thank you, Hera. I have also started to learn how to protect myself now. When my child was at his weakest, it was I who used the black stone scythe to drive away those gods who coveted us. Demeter also understood that Hera held no malice or prejudice toward Seraphine, so she was finally able to mention Seraphine's name. That's right, sister, you have become stronger, too. The power of agriculture will one day become stronger as you grow tougher. After all, Hera glanced at Seraphine, the world is expanding, and the number of humans is also expanding. Seraphine, this master of the Fusang tree, can bring sons one by one to the new world. Hera said softly. What is the use of a son? A flash of confusion crossed Demeter's face. She only knew that the power of the sun suppressed the power of plants, and her own authority was suppressed by the solar flames. A look of surprise flashed across Hera's face as she looked at Seraphine, as if asking, you actually didn't tell your own mother such an important matter. Meeting Hera's gaze, Seraphine's eyes held a hint of embarrassment. He had assumed his mother would know. After all, as a origin god who had survived for tens of millions of years, and a deity suppressed by the sun, she should have had some understanding of an authority that conflicted with her own power. Seraphine came to Demeter's side and explained, Mother, the power of the sun is not the flames on the surface, but vitality. When the light of the world was born, the first ray of vitality appeared, and finally, the original sun god, Hyperion, was born. Born together with it was the moon, which brings the power of the soul. The sun brings vitality, and the moon brings the soul, Seraphine said slowly. As the sun and moon grew stronger, Krios, god of growth, and Iapetus, god of souls, began to gestate in the womb of the great Earth Mother, Lady Gaia. The sky provided a place for the sun and moon to dwell. Growth and soul were born alongside the breath of the sky, Sorafine recounted. Hera was somewhat surprised. There were some things even she did not know, yet Sorafine actually knew these things about the beginning of the world. Sorafine did not know such details at the very beginning, but the appearance of the divinity of prophecy had let him know about this matter. Especially when he used that power of the seed that was beyond his control, his authority of prophecy was greatly strengthened. These messages were also captured from the world because of the strengthening of the divinity of prophecy. And these messages were actually able to perfect his inheritance divine office. These secret pieces of information were actually a part of culture. Culture requires the accumulation of history. Apollo has only just become the sun god, and the power of history will only be obtained after a very, very long time. Thinking of this, Sorafine narrowed his eyes. To transform things of the past into history, they must be recorded. Time is passing every moment, and things are developing as time flows. As a deity with medium divine power, Sorafine had no way to record so many things, that would require someone to assist him. The child of Iapetus, god of souls, and the goddess of fame, Clymene, the hindsight-prone Epimetheus. He does not have much intelligence and is always prone to hindsight, only knowing things that have happened in the past. This is very similar to the AI recorded in Sorafine's previous life. As long as an AI has a database, it is almost omniscient, but it cannot turn this omniscience into omnipotence. An AI lacks creativity. Epimetheus is the same. Although he knows everything that has happened in the past, he lacks this creativity. As long as he makes a deal with him, the priesthood of history will be almost within his grasp, and the inheritance of culture will also be largely filled. These things happened so long ago, I didn't expect you, Sorafine, to still be able to know them. You are truly too smart, Demeter said, not sparing her praise. Demeter was like a star-struck young girl. The gaze she directed at Sorafine always carried a filter called love. Moreover, although she was a mother for the first time, she knew how to give her love, and instead of being cruel like her father, she used gentleness to lift Sorafine forward. Mother, this is an appendage of the power of my seed. The seed were born from your power, so this glory should also have half of yours, Sorafine said earnestly. Looking at Sorafine's handsome face and the harmonious way he smiled with his mother, Hera felt a bit dizzy. Subsequently, Hera sneered inwardly. She was clear about her own personality. Apart from the 5 deities born alongside her, her heart could no longer hold any other deity. The position of God Queen is truly an abyss. When she sat in this position, she always subconsciously considered the pros and cons, so the children she conceived after becoming the God Queen always had to be considered in terms of pros and cons. She loved her children, but this love was always mixed with a part of self-interest and was not as pure as Demeter's. Thinking of this, Hera felt a bit envious of the Demeter in front of her. What a carefree sister she was. If she hadn't sat in the position of God Queen, would she be the same as Demeter? No one knew. Mother, when the first world is born, I think wheat should become the first type of plant in this world, bringing food and a benchmark for later creatures. Sorafine had already planned it out. Among the current 12 main gods, his mother's level was the weakest, and she needed replenishment. Because humans had not been disrespectful to the gods, the priesthood of famine had not been born. Famine and harvest are the 2 most important powers of agriculture. Once people adapt to the harvest, there will no longer be the title of harvest. Since harvest and famine cannot be obtained, one can only rely on opening up worlds and expanding authority. In a certain sense, this coincides with the ideas of the second-generation king of gods, Cronus. The second-generation king of gods opened up living space to expand his authority, while Demeter expanded the scope and coverage of agriculture to expand her own authority. When all the heavens and myriad worlds need agriculture to feed themselves, Demeter will also become a primordial god. But that's getting off track. This world only has chaos as one world. To form the scale of the heavens and myriad worlds, how many fruits would the world tree have to produce? I am a tree, that's true, but how could I have the ability to constantly bear so many fruits like a grapevine? If the world tree could speak, it would definitely say that to Sorafine. Ah, It should be your mushroom that becomes the first type of plant in the world. You are the god who needs to expand his authority the most. Let my wheat enter as the second type of plant, Demeter said with a determined face. She was Soraphine's mother, how could she let her child give her power? Looking at Demeter's determined appearance, Soraphine did not continue to speak. Instead, he had already begun to plan in his heart to create more varieties of mushrooms and to separate mushrooms from plants. This way, everyone would be happy. He would not be like the relatives during the new year in his previous life, pushing back and forth, wasting time. Alright, mother, then I won't say anything more. Perhaps by that time, both your wheat and my mushroom can enter as the first, who knows, Soraphine said with a smile. You are very thoughtful, Soraphine, Demeter said with a smile. Two firsts. How is that possible? Unless her wheat was no longer a plant. But if wheat isn't a plant, could it be an animal? That's unthinkable. Are you going to give wheat two legs so it can run and move? Watching the interaction between Demeter and Soraphine, Hera suddenly thought of her other children. Compared to her eldest son, Hephaestus, she loved her youngest son, Lord Ares, and her two daughters, Hebe and Eileithyia, who stayed by her side, even more. But these three children all had their flaws. Ares was not intelligent, Hebe was timid, and Eileithyia only became a deity because of her authority. Since Soraphine could resolve the flaws in Hephaestus, could he also resolve the flaws in her three children? Especially Ares. He carried her power as a Valkyrie and embodied the days of her past battles. He was her favorite child. Furthermore, if Ares became powerful, he could protect his two younger sisters when she was not around. Hera interjected, asking, Soraphine, I apologize for interrupting the pleasant parent-child time between you and Sister Demeter, but I have a matter that requires your help. Hera was indeed the god queen. After composing her thoughts, she immediately asked Soraphine, making it difficult for him to refuse. Oh, what is it, Your Highness Hera? Soraphine raised an eyebrow, feeling that things would not end so easily. Can you help me find a way to make Ares, Hebe, and Eileithyia powerful? Hera stared at Soraphine with eyes as bright as a lark. The joyous scene began to grow cold. Soraphine closed his mouth and looked at Hera. The nymphs serving in the temple of marriage instinctively lowered their heads. Even though they knew they would spend their whole lives in the temple of marriage and there was no chance of leaking anything, as long as they didn't speak out of turn. Soraphine smiled and said, Lord Ares's authority over war is very powerful, Hebe is very kind and dislikes fighting, and Eileithyia is the deity sincerely prayed to by all mothers about to give birth. They all have their unique qualities, what do they need my help with? In their domains, I am just a blank slate that knows nothing, Soraphine explained. If they were ordinary deities of Olympus, these authorities would allow them to shine and become objects of admiration for many deities. It is just a pity, Hera sighed, rubbing her abdomen, that they are the children of the king of the gods and the god queen. They have no way to bear that brilliance. There was a hint of envy in Hera's gaze as she looked at Demeter. I do not know if it is my problem, or Zeus's problem. They are always just lacking a little. Ares lacks wisdom, this is a fatal flaw, Hera said, looking at Soraphine. Soraphine's expression remained unchanged. What was Hera trying to say? Did she want him to help her children become powerful? Shouldn't she ask Zeus for such things? Soraphine smiled, and various seed appeared on his fingertips. Your Highness Hera, you see my strength and intelligence, but I am only one of Zeus's children. Does he have 10,000? 100,000? A million? Or even more? And most of these children have already perished in the world. Zeus's children are constantly being born and constantly dying. Only a mere dozen of us deities remain, and among these deities. Soraphine pondered for a moment before continuing. Only Hephaestus, Lord Ares, myself, Apollo, and Artemis, and Athena have become deities of medium divine power. My power became strong because I was lucky enough to nurture two trees that influenced the world. If not for these two divine plants, I might still be a deity of faint divine power, Soraphine said. If following the original timeline, Soraphine indeed had no possibility of rapid development. After all, the time his priesthood developed was when he entered the underworld, which was after the birth of Aphrodite's child, the little Eros. And Apollo and Artemis are powerful because they are destined to become the new generation of the sun and the moon, Sorafine said slowly. And Athena inherited half of Metis' wisdom and developed it into strategy and various other wisdom-related priesthoods, Sorafine added. Among these deities, only Hephaestus and Lord Ares have become so powerful based on their own priesthoods. They did not rely on external forces but are purely powerful. Does this not demonstrate your glory, your Highness Hera? Sorafine said. Now, among all of Zeus's children, they have more or less had the help of their mother's parents' power, or gifts from the world. Only your children are different, Sorafine said, repeating himself as he watched Hera fall into thought. Hera sighed, shook her head, and said, but this is not enough. I understand what you mean, but since Hephaestus was able to change his greatest flaw, can you help me change Ares's flaw? Ares always fails, and he lacks wisdom, he has no way to sway the tide of war. He is merely the master of war. Hera's face was full of helplessness when she mentioned Ares. That is precisely what demonstrates the power of the authority over war. As long as war exists, Lord Ares can keep getting stronger without even needing to use his brain. As long as there is war, he can break through bottlenecks, and as time passes, he will become powerful, Sorafine said, squinting at Hera. With such a powerful authority, are you still not satisfied, Your Highness Hera? The expression on Sorafine's face was as if to say that Hera was showing off. If he could trade all his own authorities for the authority over war, Sorafine would be willing to exchange all his priesthoods, except for the seed, to trade with Ares for the priesthood of war. This priesthood was too overpowered, and it always kept up with the meta, it would never become obsolete. As long as there is desire, war will not cease. Is such a priesthood not powerful? But he keeps failing, and these failures make the gods mock Ares, thinking he is just a useless deity. Hera thought of those words mocking Ares, and there was always a sense of unwillingness in her heart. But she had no choice. After the birth of Eros and the birth of Themis, goddess of justice, freedom of speech for any deity was guaranteed. Unless that idiot from before had spoken insulting words in front of Hephaestus himself, only then could they settle the score. The priesthood of victory lies with Lady Nike. Her parents are Lord Pallas, the god of military strategy and combat, and Lady Styx, the goddess of oaths, Sorafine said with a smile. Their relationship with Lord Ares in Olympus is not very good. True enough, if a normal god's origin were replaced, could they possibly have a good attitude toward their successor? It was impossible. Pallas holds the authority over military strategy and combat, but now his origin has been replaced by Ares, the further evolved god of war. It was already generous of him not to try every means possible to kill Ares. Give Ares victory. Dream on. You replaced my priesthood and still want my daughter to help you achieve victory. This was no longer a matter of simple weakness, it called for a heavy-handed response. Hera understood Sorafine's meaning, but it wasn't Ares's fault. Ares held the authority over war from birth. All gods of the war pantheon either had to join Ares's pantheon or have their origins stripped. This was the law of the world. Pallas should accept his defeat gracefully. Is there any way to salvage this relationship? To have Pallas join Ares's war pantheon? Oh, right, you must be forming your own pantheon too, Sorafine. If you can help Ares win over Pallas, I will do everything in my power to help you, Hera asked seriously and earnestly. Let Pallas join Ares's pantheon. Pallas was currently a god at the peak of medium divine power. Although Ares was also a god of medium divine power, the gap was too large. How could a father acknowledge his son as his superior? It is hard to say. After all, Lord Pallas is at the peak of medium divine power, and Lady Nike is Lord Zeus's subordinate god. If you simply want to obtain victory, you can ask Lord Zeus, Sorafine said, not wanting to get involved in the matters between Pallas's family and Ares. There was no benefit, and he might even be dragged into it. The power he primarily developed was not of the war type. Moreover, his priesthood even conflicted with those of Ares and Pallas. The inherited priesthood he was about to give birth to also grew stronger because of war and various other factors. It could be said that war was the greatest threat to inheritance. Help war become stronger. He wasn't a fool. Why create a powerful figure that could threaten him? He was already giving Hera a lot of face by not pushing for the splitting of Ares' authority. Zeus cannot influence the will of Nike, the goddess of victory. After all, Zeus has an agreement with Styx, the goddess of oaths, so I can only rely on you, Hera said seriously. If this is accomplished, I can give you a thread of marriage. Hera spoke through gritted teeth. Demeter said in surprise, Hera, you actually want to exchange it for a thread of marriage. That is condensed from your origin. It can lead any two gods into the halls of marriage, but it requires consuming a quarter of your origin. What about the injury to your godhead? Demeter asked worriedly. In fact, if it were before her godhead was damaged, she wouldn't have needed to consume so much origin. Arranging marriages for all things was her right and duty. But after Zeus's infidelity, the power of marriage became weak. After all, if the goddess of marriage couldn't even manage her own marriage, why should she be able to grant marriage to other lives? Hera shook her head to indicate she was fine, then looked at Sorophine and asked, is it possible? I know your cleverness. I will give the thread of marriage to you, and you can use this thread to create your own authority. Hera's words were truly grand, exchanging a thread condensed from a quarter of her marriage origin for Sorophine's help. On the surface, forming a marriage was the most insignificant effect of this thread, the origin contained within was what truly mattered. One only had to look at Helios, who fell just by giving away a wisp of his origin. Although it was also because Phaethon was foolish and didn't use that wisp of origin, giving away one's origin is a catastrophe no matter what. Especially something condensed from the origin itself. Essentially, the currently existing world tree, Fusong tree, and tree of friendship all carried Sorophine's origin. If someone plotted against him, Sorophine could also suffer an origin replacement like Helios. And Hera wasn't afraid that he would replace her priesthood of marriage. As long as you are willing, this is yours, Hera said, looking at Sorophine with a slight smile. Marriage is one of the most important authorities for assisting the god king. If the power of marriage is lost, Zeus will certainly suffer a loss. This is your best chance to ascend to the position of god king. Sorophine was stunned, then shook his head and said, I don't want to become the god king. Why would I do that? So, the origin of marriage is useless to me. Hearing this, Hera looked deeply at Sorophine, as if seeing such a god for the first time. I just want to keep living and stay with my mother, Lady Hera. Besides, prophecies aren't necessarily true. You could also choose to let Lord Ares become the god king, Sorophine said. If Ares cannot obtain victory and possess wisdom, then he can never ascend to the position of god king, Hera sighed, her eyes filled with complexity. Alright, Hera. Sorophine was only born over 1,000 years ago, he doesn't know about these things. You can't force him. Demeter sensed something was wrong and quickly stepped in to smooth things over. Sorophine said with a smile, the priesthood of war is too powerful. If developed to the extreme, it could ascend to destruction. Destruction is one of the subordinate priesthoods of death. Lady Hera, sometimes a flaw is also an advantage, Sorophine said softly. But the strength of war also needs wisdom to complement it. Do you think Athena could become Ares' wife? Hera said, staring at Sorophine. You would need to ask Lady Athena, not me. I don't know Lady Athena's thoughts, nor do I know if she likes Lord Ares, Sorophine said. He finally realized why Hera had talked so much. It was to get him to agree to this point, to make Athena Ares' wife. How disgusting. Now that he was in Hera's temple, even if he refused now, if Hera spread the word later, Sorophine would definitely be dragged into the matters between Ares and Athena. After that, because of his relationship with Demeter, he would be forced to help Ares marry Athena. Hera was indeed the god queen, she used these tactics with such proficiency. Although simple, they were truly disarming. Alarm bells rang loudly in Sorophine's heart. Sorophine, why are you so vigilant? Athena is just an ordinary god without any backing. Wouldn't it be good to let her become Ares' wife? Hera said, staring at Sorophine. Once Ares' power grows, relying on my relationship with Sister Demeter, Ares could become your support. Since you started with the authority of seeds, you haven't mastered any powerful strength, and Ares' war is exactly what complements you, it would be of great help to you. From the perspective of benefits and emotions, there is no reason for you to refuse. Hera appealed to his emotions and reasoned with him. Besides, once you leave the temple of marriage, Athena will only be vigilant against you. After all, the smarter one is, the more one thinks. Hera said. Upon hearing this, Seraphine stopped maintaining superficial relations. He hated being threatened the most, especially threats born from such scheming. Lord Hera, have you heard of the struggle between plants? If the nutrients on the earth are insufficient, then plants will also engage in struggle. Seraphine said indifferently. And this will bring two powerful priesthoods to my mother. Do you think I would want to master the authority of plant combat? Furthermore, Lady Athena possesses the priesthood of weaving in numerous priesthoods of art. These priesthoods are sufficient to exchange for the priesthood of plant combat. Do you think the priesthood of plant struggle is more important, or is my support for Lord Ares more important? Seraphine said with a hint of threat in his tone. Hera's smiling face froze. The current scope covered by the authority of war was only among animals, humans, and gods, because plants had sufficient nutrients and did not need to struggle. Therefore, this authority had never appeared. Plus, the definition of plants was to provide food for animals and humans, so the interaction between plants and animals did not count as combat. Hera was speechless. She had not expected that Seraphine would find a solution so quickly, and one that posed a huge threat to Ares. No matter how she spread these matters later, as long as the priesthood of plant struggle appeared, Athena would definitely exchange for it. Moreover, Athena had strategy and wisdom. She would definitely erode Ares's authority step by step. That was the most disgusting part. Even if Athena and Ares married, in the end, Athena would become the main god, and Ares would only slowly be reduced to a subordinate god. This was something Hera could absolutely not accept. I'm sorry, Seraphine. Hera apologized immediately. I only did it for Ares. He needs help, and I am just a goddess hurt by Zeus, with no way to have enough ability to help Ares grow stronger. Hera was truly the god queen. This attitude really left one speechless. If one wants to grow, one needs to do it oneself, not seek it from others. Lord Hera, you cannot help Lord Ares forever. Seraphine said. Hera nodded, her eyes very complex. Subsequently, Seraphine took Demeter and walked out of the Temple of Marriage, returning to the Temple of Agriculture. As soon as they entered the Temple of Agriculture, Demeter asked impatiently, what are the two powerful priesthoods you just mentioned to Hera? Seraphine. Mother, these are the authorities I originally wanted to tell you about, harvest and famine. These two authorities correspond to and influence each other. Seraphine said to Demeter. If the gods in the world had no divine power and origin, they would need external things to supplement them. Food is the supplement for humans and animals. So, what would happen if there was a large-scale lack of food? Seraphine asked. Death. No, pain and weakness. Death only happens when the time comes, while a lack of food brings feelings of weakness and pain. Demeter said, word by word. Then this is called famine. A large number of living beings fall into weakness and pain, lack food, and eventually die. This is called starvation. After all, agriculture is your authority, mother, only you can do that. Seraphine said. However, of course, I will think of better ways, mother. This was just something I thought of temporarily to threaten Hera. After all, with Helios as a cautionary tale, I will find a better way to help you obtain such authority. Authority obtained this way would definitely be punished by the world. Seraphine said hurriedly. Demeter chuckled and said, Seraphine, I am not that stupid. I would not bring the world's punishment upon myself for these two priesthoods, thereby reducing the time I spend with you. After speaking, Demeter pinched Seraphine's face. Do you not trust your mother that much? If even you say they are powerful priesthoods, then they must be very powerful. But I am a origin god. And with the appearance of small worlds, agriculture will also become increasingly important. You don't really think I'm not smart, do you? Hearing Demeter say that, Seraphine shook his head and said, how could that be, mother? I have never underestimated you. It's just that the benefits of the authority are too significant, and I was afraid you might not be able to hold back and would be tempted by other gods. And Lady Hera's feelings for you, as well as your feelings for Lady Hera. Seraphine said softly, if one day they need help, please tell me. Do not directly acquire these two priesthoods, I will help you with these two priesthoods later. Once the 24 solar terms were arranged by Sorophine, these two priesthoods would still have the potential to rise, and would not be punished by the world. And to lay out the 24 solar terms first, it would require the power of the 4 seasons to be completely mastered by Sorophine. After all, the 24 solar terms had a huge connection with the subsequent expansion of the authority of seeds. The birth of every kind of plant seed had to follow the solar terms, so this could not be left to others. Not to mention being as extreme as Aries and Epimetheus, at least there had to be the potential for counterattack. Rest assured, my lovely son, Sorophine. I will notify you. Alright, let's not talk about these boring things now. Accompany your mother and admire the flowers. Demeter said. The priesthood of flowers is the power of Gaia, filled with the power of beauty. No god can master it. Demeter prepared to take Sorophine to the garden she tended. Upon hearing this, Sorophine grew a sunflower from his hand, which made Demeter stunned. Isn't the priesthood of flowers in the hands of Gaia? How did it become your authority? Demeter looked on in surprise. Why would Gaia give this priesthood to Sorophine? While Sorophine and Demeter were pouring their hearts out to each other, Hera arrived at the temple of Ares, the god of war. It just so happened that these days were a rest period for Ares, the god of war. Ares. Hera walked straight in and said to him, I have found a helper for you. As long as you can make friends with him, the flaws in you might be mended. Ares frowned slightly and looked at Hera with some dissatisfaction, saying, Mother, I am the master of war. What flaws could I possibly have? As long as you give me time, all the gods who have caused me to fail will be trampled under my feet. Ares. You are indeed the god of war, but you are not the god of victory. You are merely the god of war, and you do not even possess any subordinate priesthoods. Blood, slaughter, conflict, strategy, these priesthoods related to war are not under your control, Hera advised earnestly. So what? As long as I remain the god of war, once I ascend to greater divine power or even great divine power, these gods will come to be my vassals of their own accord. I just need to wage war, Ares said, still unconcerned. However, this line of thinking from Ares was not entirely wrong. As long as war existed, his power would be inexhaustible. The more intense the war, the faster his power would increase. But no god will give you that much time. I have a premonition that a new king of the gods is likely to appear soon. And right now, you are only of medium divine power. You must know that there are countless gods of greater divine power in this world, and innumerable deities are hiding their presence, waiting for this war to arrive, Hera said. You are indeed the god of war, but war is not just war, there are other forces at play. Since the world began, countless gods have been intertwined and entangled like a messy ball of yarn. No god can remain aloof, and as the master of war, you will always be the start of the events. Ares remained unconcerned, but looking at Hera's ox-like eyes, his heart softened, for Hera was, after all, looking out for him. So he asked, Then mother, who is the helper you found for me? He is Sorophine, but he has not yet become your assistant. This final step requires you to take it yourself. After saying this, Hera took out the thread of marriage and said to Ares, You can give this thread of marriage to him and tell him that the king of the gods must have the obligation to procreate. The obligation to procreate. Ares scratched his head, somewhat confused. He looked at Hera and then asked, Mother, isn't this something formed from your own origin? What if Sorophine uses this bit of marriage origin to replace your marriage priesthood? Helios gave his child Phaethon a wisp of solar origin, which led to his priesthood falling into the hands of Apollo, Ares said, looking at Hera with a worried expression. Hera smiled, shook her head, and said, It is fine. Perhaps a change in the marriage priesthood will be beneficial to me, and it will also be able to help you. Ares looked at Hera before him, his heart pounding. He was somewhat at a loss and did not know how to respond to her. It was not because he was immersed in Hera's words, but because he did not believe that Sorophine was worth Hera paying such a high price to seek his help. In Ares's view, Sorophine was just a god of seeds. Although he possessed many priesthoods, none could compare to the authority of war. Asking this god for help was not as good as him waging a few more wars himself. But mother, why must it be Sorophine? He is just a god of seeds. Ares asked the question that had been puzzling him. It is precisely because he is a god of seeds. His most powerful authority is only winter, which is the only authority he possesses with combat capability. While his other priesthoods are powerful, they cannot compare to gods of the same level, Hera remarked in the Temple of War. Such a god is the most suitable to become your subordinate god. If you have the ability to take him in as a subordinate god, then Gaia will become your support, and the same goes for Hephaestus. Hera sighed when she said this. However, Soraphine's future is uncertain, which is why I want you to make friends with him while he is not yet powerful. Friendship is also part of the authority that Soraphine holds. As long as you give your sincerity, you will surely gain something. Hera looked at her son, who was as sturdy as a mountain, with complex feelings in her heart. Ares was good in every way, except that he was not very smart and was easily used as a tool by other gods. As the main gods appeared one by one, the ruling power of Her and Zeus began to stabilize. However, everything has a peak. Once that peak period passes, everything becomes like oil poured on a raging fire, merely accelerating its demise. As the king of the gods, Zeus's fate would certainly not be good. She needed to win over support for herself and Zeus to delay the arrival of the prophecy as much as possible. And a god like Soraphine was a flame retardant that could delay it. Most of the priesthoods on Soraphine were of the auxiliary or functional type, which was very suitable for the existence of a god-queen. This was the reason why Hera had previously felt puzzled about Soraphine. Why would Soraphine develop such priesthoods? He should have acquired priesthoods with powerful combat capabilities as much as possible, rather than these priesthoods for developing the world. This was like a pig evolving itself into a more delicious form. And with Soraphine's intelligence, it was impossible that he did not know the consequences. Moreover, Soraphine and Demeter had been coveted by a large number of gods, and she did not believe that Soraphine did not understand this. Since Soraphine knew all this, it meant that the authorities he held would be very useful in the future, and could even help Soraphine ascend to the top in one step. Hera could not imagine what authority Soraphine wanted to obtain in the future. Since she could not imagine it, she would let Soraphine take her child. This way, Ares could also gain benefits, and perhaps he could become even more powerful in the future. Even if she could make Athena the wife of Ares and obtain the priesthood of strategy, then relying on her relationship with Zeus and Demeter. It would certainly be possible to return all kinds of authorities of war to war itself, making them subordinate to war, and a war pantheon could be established. Thinking of this, there was a trace of emotion in Hera's eyes. She did not expect that Soraphine, only a few thousand years old, had already begun to establish his own pantheon. He already had several subordinate gods. If he had a few more, he would be able to have his own Soraphine pantheon. Such a god must have his relationship well managed. Originally, Hera wanted to send Hebe or Eileithyia, but Zeus wanted to use Hebe to win over Hephaestus, while Eileithyia, with her midwifery priesthood, was meant to keep Artemis in check. After all, when Leto was giving birth, Artemis had helped deliver her own mother, so she also held a portion of the midwifery priesthood. The midwifery priesthood was closely linked to the authority of reproduction and could be considered an auxiliary to it. Therefore, this portion of authority was extremely important. She worried that Eileithyia would fall in love with Soraphine, thereby leading to the loss of this authority. Now, the power of the seed that Soraphine wielded also contained the power of reproduction. Among the gods in the world, the one who held the majority of the authority of reproduction was Gaia, followed by Soraphine, and finally the other gods. Thus, the midwifery priesthood was very important to Soraphine and provided a complement to his power. If she sent Eileithyia over, it would truly be like throwing a meat bun at a dog, it would never return. Ares, however, was different. He would at least respect her as his mother, and his personality was simple due to a lack of wisdom. As a deity who enjoyed scheming, she quite liked simple beings like Ares. Judging others by herself, she believed that Soraphine would also like a simple friend like Ares, rather than a friend who enjoyed scheming just like him. As long as Ares became friends with Soraphine, then in the future, when Soraphine grew stronger, he would share a piece of the pie with Ares. It was just like when the divine office of friendship appeared. Hera had been observing from afar. Seraphine could have completely kept the divine office of friendship for himself and not shared any with Hephaestus. However, Seraphine still shared a portion of the power of friendship with Hephaestus, allowing Hephaestus to master the authority of friendship. Fine, mother, but I'm not sure if Seraphine will agree to be friends with me, Ares said casually, curling his lip. He was the god of war. Who did he have to fear? Demeter brought Seraphine to her own secret garden, which was filled with all kinds of flowers. Seraphine held Demeter's hand, looking with curiosity at these unfamiliar plants, their leaves still carrying a few dewdrops condensed from the morning mist. They shimmered on this land, just like jewels about to take shape. Turning a corner, the view suddenly opened up. A golden wave of wheat undulated in the morning breeze, the ears of wheat hanging heavy and emitting a fragrance of ripeness. In the center of the wheat field, a pebble path wound its way to a distant pavilion, lined on both sides with all kinds of flowers, white lilies, red roses, blue cornflowers, and fields of sunflowers turning toward the rising sun. What flower is this? Seraphine asked curiously, pointing at the clusters of drooping plants. It emitted an alluring fragrance, and its leaves were emerald green. It was the only type of flower in Demeter's garden that had not blossomed. Oh, this is a narcissus. It is a special flower and the symbol of my brother, Hades. This flower only blooms when he is in a good mood, Demeter explained. Huh, a narcissus. Seraphine couldn't hold it together. Wasn't this the plot where Persephone goes to the underworld? She was playing in Demeter's garden, the narcissus bloomed, and Hades, struck by little Eros's golden arrow, fell uncontrollably in love with Persephone, who was tending to the unbloomed narcissus. Thus, Hades made the narcissus bloom and took Persephone to the underworld. No, why would this kind of flower be planted in the garden? It's a bit strange. Seraphine looked at Demeter and said, Mother, why plant narcissus in your garden? It doesn't bloom, and it's not beautiful. Demeter gently brushed over the leaves of the narcissus and said with a smile, because this is a flower born from the tears Hades shed in the garden. I found it interesting, so I kept it. You should have met Hades, right? That cold-faced male god sitting behind our sister Hestia. He never has any expression, always wears black clothes, and never has any emotions. That was the product of his first emotional fluctuation, after all. As his sister, how could I not be interested? Demeter introduced with great interest. However, since you don't like these flowers, I will move them somewhere else later. After all, this has now become your exclusive temple, Seraphine. With a flick of Demeter's fingertip, those few narcissus plants were tossed to the deepest part of the garden. The moment Demeter made this choice, the sleeping Nyx awoke. Among the countless threads of fate surrounding her, a relatively thick and heavy one snapped, though it kept entangling, attempting to restore itself. Nyx plucked the broken thread of fate with her fingertips, her purple eyes filled with curiosity. Fate has actually changed. Seraphine. Persephone. How interesting. The world is heading toward the unknown, and fate is no longer fixed. What a cute child. Fate is no longer perfect, there is now the possibility of growing stronger again. Let me help you completely snap this fate. A mysterious smile appeared on Nyx's face. As her smile shifted, countless divine powers surged from Nyx's body, and the broken thread of fate completely disappeared under the erosion of Nyx's divine power. And at this very moment, purple blood tears flowed from Nyx's eyes, and her body was covered in the patterns of world law. Ha! 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 Nyx was very excited. Even though she was backlashed by the world law, she didn't care. She only saw that the thread of fate belonging to Seraphine had disappeared. Fate has actually changed. Fate can no longer just be pruned like a bonsai tree. In the future, I will master the main trunk of fate. Mother, do you feel anything? Seraphine felt as if he had lost something, yet it also seemed like he hadn't lost anything at all. But he felt much lighter. Huh, what would I feel? Demeter looked at Seraphine with some confusion and said, it was just a symbol of Hades, what could I possibly feel? Hades wouldn't get angry with me over such a small matter. Oh, I see. Seraphine narrowed his eyes. He was certain just now that he had lost something, but it wasn't a bad thing. What had he lost? Was it a new authority? If it was related to Hades, then it must be the authority of the Queen of the Underworld. This authority didn't matter to him. He didn't even want to be the king of gods. How could he possibly care for the authority of the queen of the underworld? Moreover, for many authorities, he could rely on cooperative relationships to obtain those related to the seed. The priesthood of the queen of the underworld was completely unrelated to him, and that was not a bad thing either. No, that's not right. A origin god is not that powerful. If they could truly foresee the loss and acquisition of authority, wouldn't fate have already been set in stone? That fate. I can't keep thinking about this. Sorafine forced his thoughts to pull back. He shouldn't dwell on this direction. If Nyx were to sense it, wouldn't he be finished? The goddess who controls fate is not someone to be trifled with. Mother, I am going to fulfill my priesthood. I don't want to stay in the garden for now. The flowers are beautiful, but I still have my priesthood to fulfill, Sorafine said to Demeter. Hearing this, Demeter frowned and said, why are you in such a rush to fulfill your priesthood? It can wait a few decades. You've only just started looking at the flowers, or you're not going to look at them anymore. I feel it's better to fulfill my priesthood. After all, fulfilling the priesthood once brings a reward, and that feeling is truly very comfortable, Sorafine said to Demeter. Hearing Sorafine's words, Demeter waved her hand and said, go on, go on. Remember to come see me when you have time. Sorafine nodded and left the garden. What a strange hobby, to actually treat fulfilling the priesthood as something to pursue, Demeter muttered to herself, though regarding Sorafine's strange quirk. Demeter shook her head with a smile and continued to admire the flowers. Just as he stepped out of the Temple of Agriculture, a god like a giant tower blocked Sorafine's path. Sorafine looked up. Ares. Ares stood there as if he were a towering mountain. The knotted muscles on his back and shoulders were like rolling hills. When sunlight fell upon his bronze skin, it seemed to be half swallowed by something, leaving only a dull luster. His head was slightly bowed, and his thick, unruly hair was tangled like overgrown grass. The hair color was the purest ebony, and there was a diagonal scar on his forehead, extending from his hairline to just above his brow bone. His brow bone was prominent, like two protruding cliffs, beneath which lay a pair of deep-set eyes. The color of his pupils was extremely pale, a gray so faint it was almost unfocused. His nose was high and slightly rugged. It had been broken during a battle with Zeus, and after healing, it left a barely noticeable bump, which only made his face look more aggressive. His lips were set in a firm line, always pressed tightly together. His neck was thick, with veins faintly visible, knotted like tree roots. His broad chest was covered in a thin layer of hair, which extended downwards along the texture of his muscles. The muscles on his forearms bulged high like ropes made of rebar, with veins protruding like winding rivers on a map. His palms were broad, and his knuckles were rough. His waist and abdomen were pulled tight, his abdominal muscles arranged like the patterns on a shield, with his V-taper deeply indented, as if carved by a knife. A spinal furrow ran all the way down his back, and the muscle groups on either side rippled like living things when he moved. Lord Ares, did you come to the Temple of Agriculture to look for my mother? Sorafine asked with some curiosity. Agriculture is very helpful for war. After all, war also requires logistical supplies, and this is when agriculture comes into play. Ares flicked his finger, tossing a red thread toward Sorafine, and said, Mother said that after giving this thread to you, you will be friends with me. Sorafine subconsciously took this thread. Isn't this the marriage thread condensed by Hera? Didn't he refuse it before? Why is it being given to him again? Oh, right, Mother told me to tell you that the king of gods must have the obligation of reproduction, Ares said casually. This made Sorafine's pupils constrict. Why did Hera tell him this? Is this her supporting him in competing for the authority of the king of gods? But why? I accept it, Lord Ares. I will repay you with priesthood later, and I will resolve the defects on your body, Sorafine said to Ares. He did not want to have any dealings with Ares for the time being. After all, the battle between Ares and Athena had not yet ended. Athena mastered the power of strategy, wasn't that to compete with Ares for the authority of war. As long as Athena successfully replaced Ares's portion of the origin god essence, then Ares would lose his authority just like Pallas, the god of battle. Athena possessed half the power of wisdom and also held the authority of war. Such a goddess was fully capable of competing for Zeus's position as king of gods. In Soraphine's previous life, there was also a version of the legend where Athena ascended to the position of king of gods. For such a goddess, he really had no need to provoke her. After all, this goddess's power did not conflict with his own at all. No, I don't want that. Mother said to let me make friends with you. Ares refused. What defects did he have? Seraphine was just making excuses. If he didn't make friends with him, Mother would definitely scold him. Ares thought quite proudly. This, friend, is a term used after becoming familiar with someone, Lord Ares, Seraphine explained. Aren't we familiar already? We are both gods of Olympus, and both children of Zeus, Ares said. This statement was truly a case of maternal kindness and filial piety. He didn't consider at all what would happen to his mother's marriage priesthood, just saying it directly. I don't care. Ares stared straight at Seraphine and said, anyway, you have already accepted the item. If you don't agree, then I will follow you everywhere. If you want to have romance with a nymph, I will follow you too. Ares stared at Seraphine and said. The expression on Seraphine's face couldn't hold up. Do what? Seraphine helplessly held his forehead and said, fine, we are friends now. Alright, I have things to do, you go back first. Seraphine prepared to first fulfill the obligations of his priesthood, and then go find the three goddesses of time to obtain the authority of the seasons, thereby making his own power even stronger. Finally, he would master the 4 seasons, then slowly obtain the power of the 24 solar terms, and finally complete the arrangement of the seed. After that, he would be able to devote himself entirely to obtaining the inheritance divine office. No, didn't you say friends need to be familiar? We've only said a few words, and if I leave now, then the relationship between friends hasn't become familiar yet, Ares said with that tower-like body. Seraphine couldn't hold it together. Who said Ares was stupid? This Ares was too smart. He suspected whether someone had maliciously spread the reputation of Ares being a fool, thereby causing other gods to underestimate Ares. Ares really wasn't smart, it was just that Seraphine had said it himself earlier, and Ares just happened to hear the 2 words, familiar, and continued on that. Seraphine had been trapped by his own words. Seeing Ares's persistent appearance, Seraphine helplessly held his forehead and said, fine, fine, Lord Ares, let's go fulfill the priesthood. Forget it, I'll just treat it as raising a pet. Seraphine brought Ares down to the earth, but unlike with Hephaestus, Ares fulfilled his priesthood first, and only afterwards did Seraphine fulfill his. This gave humanity a glimmer of hope. In the midst of endless war, a god of extreme handsomeness would appear. He had eyes like amber, and every strand of his hair carried the color of life, filled with emerald green. Legend had it that if anyone found such a strand of hair, it would turn into a miraculous seed, taking root and sprouting in their heart, sparking miracles and turning the impossible into the possible. His fingers were as soft and smooth as white jade, and a flurry of snow always followed behind him. As his fingertips moved, they would leave behind a beautiful flower. This peculiar flower had hexagonal ice crystals, exquisite and translucent. Like starlight, like shattered jade, it drifted down lightly. Each petal was unique, dissolving in the palm of one's hand in an instant. Legend said that those who saw these fleeting flowers would receive the blessing of winter and would not die in the bitter cold of winter. Just like that, 1,000 years passed. Stop. 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 Ares grabbed Seraphine's shoulder, his eyes unfocused and dull, saliva seemingly about to drip from the corner of his mouth. Prince Seraphine, you have been fulfilling your priesthood for 1,000 years. Why don't you rest? Even war takes a break every 10 years. Have you been assimilated by the world? Ares said listlessly. The plants on the earth had formed such a pattern. There must be flowers to grow fruits, and the fruits contained the seed. It was just the final bit, and Seraphine would have been able to arrange the propagation of plants. The thing is, my priesthood is just like that. If I don't work hard, then who will fulfill the priesthood? The world rests upon us gods, Seraphine said seriously to Ares. Taking a break wouldn't hurt, would it? You're being too exaggerated, 1,000 years. Ares felt his mind was full of war, war, war. He used to like starting wars, but now he hated it because many wars were unnecessary. Lord Ares, your priesthood is certainly fine, but my priesthood has not yet formed a new system, so it needs the assistance of my power. After all, plants are the foundation of prosperity for humans and animals. Sorafine explained calmly. Plants bring food and shelter, creating countless possibilities for the propagation of animals and humans. Fine, although I don't know why you work so hard to fulfill your priesthood, I will stay with you. My war should pause for a while. Ares closed his left eye and made a gesture similar to marking something. Looking at Ares' strange behavior, Sorafine's expression was odd. Why did Ares feel so strange? He wasn't as stupid as the rumors suggested. If one were to describe him with an interjection, it would be, ah. If one were to describe him with an adjective, it would be a simple. How ironic. The beginning of war originated from an accidental joy, from an innocent god. War was just that, pure. War was war, intended to resolve conflicts and anger. Even if, in the end, it only brought sorrow and pain. Sorafine gained a further understanding of Ares. Ares did not pose a great threat to his inheritance divine office. On the contrary, in war, inheritance became even more important. Although inheritance might be severed, it also weeded out those unnecessary, backward inheritances. Not everything needs to be kept. One must adapt to the development of the era, the changes in life, and the shifts of fate. And war was just such a good screening device, allowing useful inheritances to remain, while letting those that were unadapted or lacked the aura of the new era slowly disappear. Before, Sorafine would only leave behind inheritances and record them, forgetting that some inheritances were unnecessary, and some no longer fit the new era. These things needed to be discarded. Thank you, Lord Ares. Sorafine suddenly said this out of the blue, leaving Ares confused. However, since Sorafine had expressed thanks, Ares said foolishly, "You're welcome, although I don't know how I helped you." Ares looked at Sorafine and scratched his head. It's fine, I will explain. I previously thought that war only brought destruction, so I kept my distance from you, Sorafine said. But, in these 1,000 years, I have observed too many lives in war. They yearn for the hope of survival, and before death, they pass on the things of their lives. Inheritance has also been strengthened, and my seed have unknowingly become entwined with the faith of humans and animals. A unique seed appeared on Sorafine's fingertip. This seed was entwined with the faith of countless animals and humans. The faith brought by every human living in the flames of war was only a wisp, but it was complex, gathering bit by bit, it was quite considerable. Feeling the power of faith carried within that seed, Ares asked curiously, "Why is your power of faith so strange? It's so complex, yet the quantity is so large, as if you extracted a little bit from every human. But I recall you don't have a city-state of your own, right? This is too much, it's almost catching up to my power of faith for a year," Ares said. Sorafine smiled slightly and didn't say anything. After all, for gods, faith is a catalyst, but it is also a drug, it is addictive. Once one feels the pleasure brought by the increase in the power of faith, the future is like someone deep in a quagmire, slowly sinking into the water until they are sealed, until they perish. What are you going to do with this faith? Enhance your strength, or create a few of your priests. As he spoke, Ares counted on his fingers. However, you have too many priesthoods, and every priesthood needs a priest, so this bit of faith doesn't seem enough. Also, priests seem to be generally served by demigods or the descendants of demigods. You don't seem to have any descendants, do you? Ares asked doubtfully. I will not use this faith to enhance myself, nor will I use this faith to create priests. Instead, I will use it to create new trees. This tree will replace me in harvesting faith from humans, Sorafine said. Furthermore, if demigods or the descendants of demigods are unwilling to serve as my priests, I can choose humans who are willing, Sorafine said dismissively. From the information provided by the world, the strength of a demigod priest would be a bit stronger than a general priest, but Sorafine did not care. His priests did not need to fight, but appeared for the development of the world. That's the end of part 4. Part 5 is coming soon.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and support our channel for more stories.